Wait, hold up. What is going on, everybody, and welcome to CTW Live. I am your host, Seamus Zarlingo. And folks, we have a big one. We have a big one to break for you all here. Kristaps Porzingis on his way out of Boston. This comes from Shams Charania here on this June 24th, hot, humid afternoon in the middle of the summer. Shams Charania tweets, breaking. Boston, Atlanta, and Brooklyn are finalizing a three-team trade that sends Kristaps Porzingis and a second-round pick to the Hawks, Terrence Mann, and Atlanta's number 22 pick to the Nets, and Georges Niang and a second rounder to the Boston Celtics. So Kristaps Porzingis on his way out of Boston, Georges Niang on his way in. A huge, huge move by the Boston Celtics. And here another tweet from Shams Charania. Opportunistic acquisitions for the Hawks and Nets while the Celtics are now out of the salary cap's second apron. Kristaps Porzingis, a champion with the Boston Celtics, moving on out. Georges Niang and a second round pick moving on in, and as well as a second round pick also moving out of Boston. However, what a 24 hours for the Boston Celtics, and we're reacting to it live here. We were not live during the trade, but we were recording another podcast about the NBA draft when the trade went down. So we'll have a couple of live reaction videos on both the Holiday and Porzingis trades because both of those trades we were recording during the news drop. However, this one, our official live reacting to the news here of Kristaps Porzingis being sent to the Atlanta Hawks in exchange for Georges Niang. Basically, the trade going down for the Celtics. A couple of second rounders in there being swapped. We'll have to see which second rounders those are moving into the future for both of these teams, the Atlanta Hawks and the Boston Celtics, and also the Brooklyn Nets. We'll get into them within this trade as well. However, let's start with the Celtics because this is the big talking point here. We're a Celtics Talk Weekly here. We got to talk about the Celtics first. The Celtics came into the summer. We all knew where they were going to be. We all knew where they were going to be going into next season with Jason Tatum tearing his Achilles in Game 4 of the 2025 Eastern Conference semifinals against the New York Knicks. In Game 4, the entire trajectory of the Celtics' history changed in Game 4 when Tatum went down. And we knew the Celtics were trying this summer to get off the salary number in which they held going into the summer, in which was going to put them and hamper them from ultimately making future moves in the future and future moves later on down the line. But the total number coming into this offseason for the Celtics, their salary number without free agents, without any moves, without anything, the salary number was $227.8 million. Meanwhile, the second apron is $207.8 million. That is the second apron line. So the Celtics, they were exactly $20 million over the second apron. And real quick, let's go over in this trade what the second apron implicates for the Celtics and any other team that finds themselves in the second apron. Here are the implications. A team in the second apron cannot aggregate salaries in a trade, cannot take back 125% of an outgoing salary. Every trade must be dollar for dollar. You cannot take back 25% more than the salary in which you send out. That's a general rule across the NBA for trades, and that makes trade, it makes the market a little bit more fluid and expands teams' ability to do certain deals with other teams. However, if you're over the second apron, you can't take back 25% on top of the salary you send out. So it has to be dollar for dollar, straight up. If you're over the second apron, you cannot use the taxpayer mid-level exception. That's a $5.7 million contract in which a team can hand out. Now, I'll just point this out. We'll point this out. Now, we'll get into it a little bit later, but I'll point this out with this trade with the Celtics. The Celtics can now use the taxpayer mid-level exception, it's rumored that Al Horford will demand at least a taxpayer mid-level exception salary this offseason. So very important for the Celtics and potentially bringing back Al Horford by executing this trade. However, more second apron implications here. Cannot sign a waived free agent who previously made over the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. So last season we saw Marcus Smart traded to the Washington Wizards. We talked about at the trade deadline. Oh, if he's waived, maybe the Celtics. Nope, wasn't possible because Marcus Smart, he was making $21 million, still makes over $20 million next season, but made it last season. If he were to be waived by the Wizards, the Celtics couldn't go out and sign him because he was over that $14.1 million mark. So anybody who's waived, if they're over that, if their previous contract was over 14.1 million, the second apron team, specifically the Celtics, we're talking about them in this situation before these trades of Porzingis and Holiday, they could not sign a waived free agent who previously made over the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. You cannot use trade exceptions if you are over the second apron. You cannot send out cash in trades, so no cash considerations sent out in trades for picks or players or anything else. You cannot trade a first-round pick 7 years in advance. And if a team is over the second apron in 3 out of 5 seasons, first round, a team's first round pick moves to the end of the first round. So if the team finds themselves in the second apron or over the second apron, rather, in 3 out of 5 seasons, their first round pick moves to the end of the first round. So teams certainly trying to avoid that within the second apron and all the implications that come with it. But this is the point of this trade for the Boston Celtics is they and we brought up that tweet from Shams Charania. Let's bring it back up here because I think it will symbolize exactly why the Celtics made this move. Here it is. So opportunistic acquisitions for the Hawks and the Nets. We'll get into them later. While the Celtics are now out of the salary cap second apron. The second apron, that is the most important statement within this tweet and for this entire trade. Looking at the return for the Boston Celtics, because the initial thought of this trade up front is Celtics Nation is not going to like this trade. Okay, they're just simply not going to like this trade. You're giving away Kristaps Porzingis, who is a near all-star level center for you. If you're the Celtics, you're giving him away for Georges Niang. Okay, Georges Niang, who the Cavs were okay selling at the deadline, and not necessarily selling, but shooing away from the roster for DeAndre Hunter and upgrading that spot. So Georges Niang, a rival of the Celtics in the past. We had the moment where Tatum, the big game earlier in the year, the Cavs, they're 15-0. They come into the Garden for a big NBA Cup game. And at the end of the first quarter, Jason Tatum stepped back on Georges Niang. Georges Niang goes flying. Tatum hits the buzzer beater. And that's a great moment right there. But it also set the tone with Georges Niang and the Celtics. Might have been at halftime, first quarter. It doesn't really matter. It was a buzzer beater, not at the end of the game. Regardless, the Celtics won that game anyway. But Georges Niang, a rival of the Celtics, a player that we never like to compete against, but I will say the personality of Georges Niang, I'm excited to see what that could turn into in Boston. I think he is just, we talked to Boston B Money yesterday. He brought up the word rabid a lot. The rabid Boston crowd and Georges Niang, I think they're going to mesh very, very well. That being said, the ability of Georges Niang out on the floor, Kristaps Porzingis is simply a better player. And he simply is a more dynamic player, especially at his position. Georges Niang, I mean, he's a middle of the road role player essentially. However, this trade was made for salary purposes. If you're looking at it from a Celtics perspective, because now the Celtics, with this trade, they're not getting back player value in return with Georges Niang, but they're getting back value within their flexibility in which they maintain going into the future, in which now they retain going into the future. The Celtics do, because last night the Celtics make the deal for Anthony Simons. They cut about $5 million off their salary books with that deal. So they were $20 million over the second apron. They cut about $5 million of salary off there. However, from this trade, you're going from a $30.7 million contract in Kristaps Porzingis to, if you look at Niang's contract, another expiring deal. Simon's expiring. We found out last night, or we knew ahead of time, he was an expiring deal as well. But Niang, he is going to be expiring next year, $8.2 million. So you're turning 30.7 into 8.2. That is certainly cutting a lot of salary there, and it's going to put the Celtics under the second apron, which is the big point in this trade. And the Celtics, they save $22.5 million against their salary books with this trade. And on top of the Simons trade, you're talking about savings of upwards of 27, 28, 29 million dollars. If you really do the math with all these contracts and the decimals involved. And when we talk about decimals, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars on the end there. But ultimately, this move, a massive salary move for the Celtics. The last two moves, massive salary moves, attaining Simons or acquiring Simons and now acquiring Georges Niang. If you really look at it up front, you have Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, uh, your two additions from 2 seasons ago, the two biggest additions from 2 seasons ago, in which were starters with the Celtics, near all stars with the Celtics, and which led the Celtics along with Brown, Tatum, Derek White, Al Horford, Peyton Pritchard, Luke Cornett, and Sam Hauser, led the Celtics to a title in 2024. Now you're replacing Porzingis and Drew Holiday with Anthony Simons and Georges Niang. People are not going to be too happy about that whatsoever, and that's certainly a downgrade when it comes to players, talented players on your roster if you're the Celtics. However, it's the salary we need to pay attention to here because the Celtics are saving upwards of 27, 28, 29 million dollars with the two trades in which just happened today and last night with Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. And now we went through all the second apron implications earlier, but now the Celtics take themselves out of the second apron, gives themselves a lot more flexibility to actually make moves with other teams. They can now aggregate salaries. You know, Sam Hauser and Georges Niang, you can trade both of them for an $18 million contract. The Celtics were not able to do that before whatsoever. You now own the ability, I mentioned this while going through the implications, you own the ability to actually hand out the mid-level exception this summer, in which you could give to Al Horford. Al Horford, he's rumored to demand the mid-level exception, at least on the market this offseason, on the free agent market, as he's a free agent. And now the Celtics might have the ability to sign Al Horford back to the roster. So that could be big for the Celtics ultimately. And if you really look at the rest of the team, you don't necessarily need to sell other players because the conversation has been, well, you're selling Porzingis, you're selling Holiday, you're selling Sam Hauser. Well, now I kind of look at Sam Hauser and go, is Sam Hauser, is he a little more safe now? So there have been some rumblings that he could still be on the move. Georges Niang, he's coming in, and Baylor Sharman, both of those guys are taking over some forward slots off the bench, which if you look at Hauser, that is his role. He's one of the first forwards, if not he is the first forward off the bench. Now you have Georges Niang, you still have Baylor Sharman in there, who is now developing, and people believe he will be, along with us. I mean, here at Celtics Talk Weekly, we believe he will be a rotation piece next season. But ultimately, you might see a scenario where the Celtics don't need to move a bunch of other players, as we previously thought was going to be the case, because with this Holiday and Porzingis move, you're under the second apron if you're the Celtics. And I'll say this: they could cut more salary as time moves on. The ownership, they're still paying a luxury tax bill. All right, they're still paying a luxury tax bill because the Celtics with this move, I believe, let's see, let's do the math on this real quick just to make sure. So 227.8 million dollars, which was the number coming into the offseason here. So you get rid of Porzingis's 30.7 million, you get rid of Holiday's $32.4 million, and you add in Simon's 27 point he's about what, $27.8 million, and then you have Niang 8.2. So you're now at $200 million. So you're still over the first apron if you're the Celtics here. You're still over the first apron, still over the luxury tax line. So it's very possible the Celtics still get themselves under the luxury tax line, because if you think about it, they're only $13 million away from that point. If they get themselves under the luxury tax line, I mean, the ownership, they're not paying any bills next season for the team from a luxury tax standpoint. And that could be big for a team playing without Jason Tatum. I don't want to say not competing next year, but we don't know exactly what the competitive state of the Celtics will be. next season without Jason Tatum, the Celtics could try to get themselves under the luxury tax line with another move, such as Sam Hauser. You could see other guys on the back end, maybe Tillman, Kata, Davidson. You sell any of them, maybe Jordan Walsh. I doubt it. Any of those guys could be throw-ins to any deal, but I'm not specifically looking at them and saying, "Oh, the Celtics are going to sell them at this point in time." But I think Sam Hauser, you never know with all the Fords, could still be on the table. I see a scenario here where they potentially go into the season. You think about Tatum not being in the lineup with the Celtics. That's a Ford. That's your best Ford not in the lineup. If you're the Celtics, you have Jaylen Brown in that Ford rotation. But the Ford rotation right now is basically Jaylen Brown, and he's a point forward, right? He's going to handle the ball. He's also going to defend as a forward on the other end, a wing, right? So you have Jaylen Brown, Sam Hauser, Georges Niang, and Baylor Shireman. Those are your four guys right there. And you could see a scenario where I see a scenario personally where they bring all four of these forwards into the season and let them play out and see which one. And specifically, Jaylen Brown is probably not going to be that one, but out of Hauser, Niang, Shireman, who are the two? Who are the two guys out of those three they can really ride with? And the third one out, it could be um, a salary dump move later on down the line. Say a Niang, he's moved at the deadline. Maybe Sam Hauser, he's moved at the deadline. A lot more future money on Sam Hauser than Niang. Niang would be an expiring deal. Hauser, a little bit more value with him there because of the future money. He's making 10 million next year, 10.8 the year after, and then 11.7, and then 12.5 in 28, 29. So long-term money there with Sam Hauser. The Celtics, I wouldn't be shocked if they try to get to a lower number this summer on the luxury tax totem pole here and sell Sam Hauser too. But I think the way the roster's set up, you're now $5 million away from the first apron if you're the Celtics. So you're under the second apron, which is important by $7 million, which is pretty substantial. I would say you have $7 million of room there before the second apron kicks in yet again. But you're $5 million. You're about $4 million. I mean, it's 195.9, so you're basically at 196 there for the first apron line. But you're at $200 million right now if you're the Celtics. You're 5 million over the first apron and what 13 about 12 million because that's 187.9, so about $12 million over the luxury tax line. I wouldn't be surprised because you got to think about it like this: the luxury tax, the longer you go into the luxury tax, right, the more money ownership is paying for the team. So right now you have Sam Hauser at $10 million. If you offload that $10 million deal, say you get back a $2 million deal in return, you offload $8 million. That's not just $8 million off the team's salary books. That's upwards of 10-20 million dollars coming off the books of the ownership paying the luxury tax, right? The tax in which is actually going to be paid to the league coming out of the owner's pocket, right? The owner's own pocket. That number is much more substantial than the initial salary number. It's not just, $8 million we save. It's beyond 10, 15, $20 million to the owners. And I understand people don't want to hear that, but that's the the actual reality of the entire NBA is these owners, when you're throwing around millions of dollars, I mean, billionaires, they did not become billionaires by throwing away money. Now, if you can get rid of, I mean, in my mind, Sam Hauser, I do like his deal in the future right now. I see us again. The Celtics could sell Sam Hauser again, or not again, but they could sell Sam Hauser this offseason in the summer to get to a lower number. The only issue with that is why wouldn't why I shouldn't say an issue, but the scenario that could play out otherwise, right? And I kind of look at it and say, well, why wouldn't you go do this? Is bringing Sam Hauser, bringing Georges Niang, bringing Baylor Shireman, Jaylen Brown into the season all in the same forward rotation, letting those guys play out with each other. And then at the deadline, if you want to shed further salary, you can look at a guy like Niang and go, well, he's expiring. Let's get rid of $8 million there. Let's get rid of him for a second round pick. Give him to the Nets. Give him to whoever has the salary room in which can actually take him on, a tanking team per se. There's not going to be too many tanking teams next year in the NBA, but they certainly are out there still. across the league. Even Sam Hauser at the deadline. Could you move Sam Hauser and dump his contract? These things are not finalized until later on in time for the Celtics. So the luxury tax, it's not a finalized thing until essentially after the trade deadline, and it's technically at the end of the season. But we know trade deadline, you can't make any moves after that. So it's basically the trade deadline. But the Celtics, with the implications at play here, it could be they could sell Sam Hauser this offseason, could sell him at the trade deadline, could do the same thing with Georges Niang. I think right now they're going to keep their salary number around. I don't see the Celtics personally. I could see them making I could see them making a move to upgrade the roster. Say there's an upgrade from Sam Hauser, and you can now like this is a big thing. You can now aggregate salary if you're the Celtics after this Porzingis move. Okay, you can aggregate salary, so you can theoretically put Sam Hauser, Tillman, Kata together, and that's 14, 15 million dollars in salary right there to go out and upgrade the roster. I mean, right there you're looking at, okay, well, your depth is definitely you're taking a little bit of a hit when it comes to the depth, but we all see minimum contracts, and there are going to be some first round picks coming in, or rather one first round pick coming in for the Celtics here this year, unless they move off of that first round pick. But the Celtics, there could be another move on the table. Just simply, I'm talking a lot about the whole money saving part of this with the Celtics, but there could be another move on the table for the Celtics that suggests the Celtics could upgrade their roster with the players at the back end, specifically a Sam Hauser, a Georges Niang. Both of those guys, you could aggregate their salary and come up with $18 million. You could add on the 2 million, all the $2 million. I mean, all these guys are making under $2.7 million. Baylor Shireman, Xavier Tillman, Nehemias Queta, JD Davison, and Jordan Walsh. All of those guys could be added into any deal to get the salary number up to match deals across the league. $10 million from Sam Hauser, $8 million from Georges Niang. All of those contracts under $2.7 million. I'll throw in Pritchard. I don't think you add in Pritchard to a deal for salary purposes unless you're getting something truly amazing out of the deal. But Pritchard, he's 7.2 next season. He's just way. I mean, his contract is one of the biggest bargains in the league. I mean, he's one of the best bench players in the league. Just won sixth man of the year, and he's making basically. I mean, he's making. Well, first of all, he's making $7.2 million next year, but he's making a salary of a rookie essentially. I mean, he's on a rookie's salary now, and we're going to see picks. I mean, I believe this salary next season. I believe teams drafting every team drafting the lottery. I believe they'll be paying their lottery pick more than Peyton Pritchard next season. I believe that is actually a stat. So that is, if you're just looking at it from that standpoint, definitely Peyton Pritchard, a huge bargain. I would not consider him being dealt in a. I would not consider the Celtics trading him in a deal to add a salary onto a deal to make things work. I mean, I think he's just too valuable to move at that number of $7.2 million for what he gives the team. Believe he's likely safe. I mean, nobody's really truly safe as we've seen. I mean, Luka Doncic was just moving. I mean, anything can happen in the NBA, but Peyton Pritchard, he seems like a safer name on the roster. However, everybody else. I mean, now you're looking at Tatum and Brown. I don't see. We've been talking about Brown. The viability of the Celtics moving him could happen this summer, but I don't really see it. So essentially, right now you have Tatum, Brown, Derek White. Those are your top contracts within the organization after these moves. It's Tatum, Brown, Derek White, straight up. Then you have Anthony Simons at $27.7 million expiring coming in next season. Georges Niang, $8.2 million expiring next season. And after that, you have Sam Hauser, $10 million, Peyton Pritchard, 7.2, and then we went over Shireman, Tillman, Kata, Davison, Walsh, all making under $2.7 million. So the Celtics roster right now, just how it shapes up, the forward rotation, you have Tatum, Brown, Hauser, Niang, Shireman. That's your forward rotation. And if you're looking at the guards, you have Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, Anthony Simons, JD Davison. And also, I want to add in Jordan Walsh, forward rotation, got to add him in there. But for the big man depth right now, you have Xavier Tillman and Neemias Queta. So right now, the if you just look at the Celtics roster after this trade and consider the free agent class of the Celtics with Cornette and Al Horford, the Celtics need a big guy. They just sent away a big guy, got back a forward, and received and acquired a forward in the trade. And now Porzingis, he's down in Atlanta. So you're missing a big guy there if you're the Celtics. I mean, think the top three big man on the Celtics right now from last year, no longer, and I don't want to say no longer around because two of them could technically be back, and Al Horford and Luke Cornett. That's another thing in this whole trade is can Luke Cornett, can Celtics now re-sign him with a little bit more? I mean, they're $7.8 million under the second apron. Can they cut a little bit more salary and sign Luke Cornett? That's a possibility in all of this. However, I was talking about all the bigs. Porzingis, Horford, Cornett. Those are your top three bigs from last season. Porzingis now in Atlanta. Horford a free agent. Cornett a free agent. Horford is really at 39 years old the only player out of those three that I feel confident in actually returning to the Celtics. Number one, you had the mid-level exception to pay to Al Horford now if you're the Celtics. But number two, he's, let's just face it, the history of him in the Celtics. I mean, he's a Celtic for life. He's a staple. He's won a championship with the Celtics. And his Celtic story, I mean, he joined the Celtics back in the summer of 2016, leaves in 2019, two terrible seasons. He's an underwhelming season with the Sixers, and then he's with the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are tanking while housing Al Horford, and then comes back to the Celtics, makes a finals run in 2022, and it's not finished, finally wins that ring in 2024. So I feel as if Al Horford, fairly safe name if he gets the mid-level exception, but again, he's 39 years old. How much longer and how much usage can you actually get out of Al Horford next season? I mean, are we really the last two seasons was we were thinking, oh, this is a lot for Al Horford, right? Like when is he going to actually when is he actually going to deteriorate, break down XYZ, right? Never happened over the last two seasons. Now, Al Horford, that's where you got to be careful. Age 39, 40, we're still asking those questions. I would see Al Horford coming back, but can he be your starting center? You need another big guy if you're the Celtics. Right now, it could be Cornette, in which they try to go after in free agency to re-sign him because the Celtics, they do have rights to him in which can they can exceed certain salary thresholds in which uh, other teams cannot. If you're signing another player from another team, say Cornette demanded $10 million and the Celtics don't have the space. Well, a player demanding $10 million from another team can't sign a $10 million deal with the Celtics. Meanwhile, Luke Cornette can, and basically from that standpoint, the Celtics can put themselves into a higher salary threshold. Sometimes that can be suicide for a team, but a team does own the ability to do it. So sometimes we don't see teams do it just simply because of the money implications, but the usage of the bird rights are certainly there. But the Celtics, kind of breaking this whole thing down, right? Porzingis gone. You only have Tillman and Queta. I honestly would not expect Tillman to be. Maybe he's a veteran. He's only 26. I mean, I was like a veteran locker room guy, but he's only 26. I mean, most of the team is actually above that age, other than Shireman and Davis, and everybody else is above 26. So Tillman's actually a younger guy on the roster, and Queta. He's 25. But those guys right there, if you're, I would not expect Tillman. I mean, maybe he's on the roster next season. He seems like a salary. You could cut his salary. I mean, he didn't do much for the Celtics at all last season. I just don't know what his role is in Boston. If he wasn't playing last season, what makes anybody think he's going to play this season? Because it wasn't as if, oh, there's too many bigs around. It was, nope, they're just simply, they don't, I mean, they don't like Joe Mazzulla doesn't like Xavier Tillman. He can't make threes consistently. They're trying to use him as a stretch big when he's just not a stretch big. So I wonder if they do sell off Tillman there because right now you only have Tillman and Queta as your bigs if you're the Celtics. Again, you could sign back Horford, but even under those circumstances, you have Horford, Tillman, Queta. You need another big guy. And even if Cornette comes back into the fold, you just lost Porzingis. You just lost your best big guy. We've seen the Celtics manage without Porzingis in the past, but this is going to be different. No Holiday, Georges Niang comes in, Anthony Simons comes in, and now Porzingis, if he's not in the lineup, and we are only looking at Cornette and Horford, how effective is the big man rotation? That I'm just saying this, in that Knicks playoff series when Porzingis wasn't available, at Cornette and Horford. I understand Cornette came up with 7 blocks in Game 5 and gave us that iconic moment in Game 5, but most of the series, it was pretty rough for Luke Cornett. Did not have the same impact as he had in the regular season during that Knicks series. And I just felt as if guys like Mitchell Robinson, even Carl Anthony Towns, just a little bit more athletic, more agile, grabbing more rebounds. The Celtics looked slow and rickety and old against the Knicks. All right. And it was the Knicks. It's not as if they're the most, up and down, athletic, fast, quick team. Yet the Celtics looked slow against the Knicks. They looked like the older team, right? The team with the veterans who aren't moving as quick out there. If you run back a center rotation of Cornette, Horford, Tillman, and Cater without Porzingis, which is basically what we saw at the end of the playoffs because of Porzingis's health, um, I that that's just not going to get it done for the Celtics. That's simply not going to get it done, and it leads me to believe the Celtics could be going the big man route in the draft. I find it interesting. A lot of talk about there haven't been a ton of rumors about this out there, but there have been murmurs. Celtics could look to move up in the draft now. It would be a little bit of an addition of salary, but the Celtics do have the ability to add a little bit of salary now, considering they're $7 million under the second apron. If they add, say, if they move up in the draft, add another million, $2 million for a guy they really want, say like Thomas Sorber, who's soaring up the draft board right now. Maybe that's a viable option for the Celtics to potentially replace the big man depth on this roster with Kristaps Porzingis now down in Atlanta. But Kristaps Porzingis at the end of that playoff run, I mean, I just wonder what it could have looked like for the Celtics. This deal, what it maybe could have looked like if Kristaps Porzingis didn't go out the way in which he did for the Celtics, because the end of that playoff run was truly brutal for the Celtics and Kristaps Porzingis, but Porzingis in particular. The illness, I don't understand what happened with the illness. He was dealing with it in March. He missed 9 of 10 games. He missed 8 straight games with the illness. And we didn't even know what it was at the time. He termed it as a viral infection during a tweet in which he wrote to Celtics Nation. And we never knew exactly what that illness was until the playoffs. We heard it was an upper respiratory illness, and it was affecting his stamina, his conditioning, everything, just his ability to breathe out on the basketball floor. Right? People forget about how important it is to actually be in shape when you're playing basketball and to actually be able to breathe. Right? Kristaps Porzingis couldn't breathe during that playoff run, and it made no sense because he dealt with it in March and then he didn't deal with it. He won multiple player spotlight awards, multiple Celtics Nation Rise MVP awards, everything, right? So I mean, everything we keep track of players playing well in a game. Kristaps Porzingis was hitting those marks, right? He was hitting those marks. And yet a month and a half after he deals with the initial illness, he's dealing with it again in the NBA playoffs. And he deals with it in the Knicks series, but in the Magic series, we didn't hear anything about it. He was just playing like crap. I mean, he was I mean, come on. In the Magic series, he couldn't take advantage of mismatches. He couldn't shoot the ball. He's making bad decisions all over the place. He wasn't playing physical. Wasn't It didn't look in shape. And in the Knicks series, it just got worse along with his availability. At least in the Magic series, his availability was at least there. Um, and we saw the iconic moment, Kristaps Porzingis getting hit in the head and all the blood dripping down, and they put that big old World War I Band-Aid on him to seal him up before I believe he got stitches for that hit from KCP. So now KCP and Kristaps Porzingis no longer on their respective teams anymore. Feels like that game was just yesterday, and yet both of these players not on the Magic and Celtics anymore. But Kristaps Porzingis, at least he was available during that Magic series. In the Knicks series, he wasn't even available. And to me, this is the main concern with Kristaps Porzingis heading into his 30s now, because he's going to be 30 years old. He's going into his 30s. My main concern with him is how durable is he going to be for a full season? And can you always rely on Kristaps Porzingis to actually be there for your team come playoff time? And can he last 4 rounds? I mean, I've been on this point with Joel Embiid for quite a while, and it's played out in for me, I hate being right on a player like Joel Embiid when it comes to the negative side of a player, right? Where it's like, yep, this is a negative, and and this is how it plays out as we've seen with Embiid in time. But Embiid, I said back in 2021 when the Sixers were the number one seed, Embiid is not meant to go all 4 rounds. He's not a durable player. If you put him through 4 rounds of NBA basketball, he's going to get hurt at least once. And we got to think 4 rounds. That's only 20 games, but 20 games of the most intense basketball on the planet of the earth. That's what the NBA playoffs are. And if you put a guy like Kristaps Porzingis in that setting going forward, Joel Embiid in the past, can you rely on him to be fully healthy throughout 4 rounds? It's not just the 82 game schedule, it's the 4 rounds in the NBA playoffs. And this year, the Celtics did everything in their power to preserve Kristaps Porzingis for the NBA playoffs. And yet, Kristaps Porzingis was not available in the NBA playoffs in the way in which you'd want him to be, both productive and just simply on court, right? On court and productive on court. Because there was the on court at first in the Magic series, wasn't productive, and then that non-productivity turned into non-availability for Kristaps Porzingis in that second series versus the Knicks. I have major concerns for Kristaps Porzingis going forward because it's not just about the whole regular season and getting through that portion of the season, right? It's the 4 rounds, right? It's the 4 rounds. However, not we're not surprised. Kristaps Porzingis is on the way out. The return, people are going to hate the return. Georges Niang, the minivan. Okay, a great nickname there, the minivan. I'm sure we're gonna see a couple of designs and shirts from the Boston fan base and all the Boston apparel companies out there who are just simply amazing. I'm sure there's going to be some nice minivan shirts coming out on Georges Niang from this trade. But the Celtics, they're definitely looking at a team that's a little worse next season, but I don't think the job is done here for the Celtics whatsoever. There could be another move on the horizon. Shams Charania last night said in a tweet, if we might still have this in the stream here. Let's bring up this tweet because I thought this was. I asked Griffin and Franco about this last night, see what they thought about the language of this tweet. But here's how it reads. An extremely active offseason begins for the Celtics with the trade of Drew Holiday, who played a critical role in Boston's 2024 NBA championship. That's not the language I care about. This is the language I care about. The Celtics remain engaged in trade talks surrounding multiple, multiple, multiple key players on the roster. And let me put an emphasis again on multiple key players on the roster, sources said. So, multiple players. So that's last night for Jrue Holiday. Multiple players. That entails more than one. More than one player, right? More than one. Well, today we saw one player exit the facility in Kristaps Porzingis, right? Who are the multiple, right? Who are the multiple players? Is it Sam Hauser? Are there more? Or are there more players? Derek White, Jaylen Brown? Are they really on the table? I mean, if that notification comes through right now, I'm going to absolutely lose it. Again, two live draft or not draft reactions, trade reactions here on the Celtics Talk Weekly airwaves for Porzingis and Holiday. Ironically enough, did not get to cover 2 years ago them actually getting traded to the Celtics, but getting traded away from the Celtics. Yep, here we are, folks. We get to cover that moment for certain. But ultimately, I made up a list of why the Celtics would trade Kristaps Porzingis this month, not this month, this offseason. And I know we were supposed to do a KP live, supposed to use all this content, but oh man. Wow. Atlanta was a note. Atlanta teams vying for Porzingis. Atlanta was on the list. So good to note there. But why? Why the Celtics would move off Porzingis? 42 games played last season. Missed substantial time in the playoffs in 2024. Missed time in the playoffs in 2025. Again, goes along with the point of can you rely on Kristaps Porzingis moving forward? Atlanta, if you look at their roster, they're actually void of bigs right now. They are fairly void of bigs. Yes, they have Onyeka Okongwu there, but it seems as if Clint Capella will be moving on in free agency. So Atlanta was a team going into the offseason you could pinpoint as, hey, there's no big guy here. Again, you have Onyeka Okongwu, who's a pretty serviceable big, a starter level big in my opinion. You could start him and feel pretty comfortable with the rest of your lineup for sure. But after him, you seriously have zero bigs. You could say Mohamed Gueye. I mean Gueye. I just I I let's see. Yeah, I mean six. But again, I just I don't. There's not another big on this Atlanta roster. There's straight up not another big on this Atlanta roster outside of Okongwu and Mohamed Gueye. I mean, both of those guys. I'm not Okongwu. You could feel comfortable with him as a starter. Gueye is, Gueye had some good moments last season, but he's still very young, making just a very minimal salary. So he's not necessarily a guy you're looking to rely on in your rotation or start or do anything of that metric whatsoever. But uh, only two big guys there. Now you add in Kristaps Porzingis, Clint Capella likely leaving in free agency, as I already mentioned here, but Atlanta, a clear team who could have traded for Porzingis coming into this offseason, given their roster circumstances and having virtually no or lack of reliable big men. So now Atlanta takes a flyer on Kristaps Porzingis, and we'll see what kind of future money Kristaps Porzingis could receive from Atlanta going ahead into the future. However, why the Celtics likely I'll just go through the list here. Why the Celtics could move on from Kristaps Porzingis, and was why they could move on, right? This was before they actually moved on, but I think it could also give some insight as to why they moved on from Kristaps Porzingis. Although a lot of us know exactly why, other than the money, the illness, everything, right? But 42 games played last year. Missed time in this year's playoffs. Missed time in the 2024 championship run. Substantial amount of time in that run. And this run, he was just a complete zero by the end of the Celtics playoff run, unfortunately. Um, and again, he was put on ice the entire season this year and still couldn't be healthy, which is a terrible sign. Virtually, he was a non-effective player at the end of his Celtics tenure. Basically a zero. Terrible way to see Kristaps Porzingis go out with the Celtics, but that was the reality. He's an expiring deal. It definitely could have. That's where I just wonder what kind of value did that actually own on the market? Because if the Celtics were trading that straight up for another contract, what would that look like? When I say another contract, another big contract, this deal, the Celtics traded a $30.7 million deal for an $8.2 million deal. I mean, that is a pure salary cutting move. I just wonder what type of deals the Celtics could have mined, because you think maybe there was a deal out there for Holiday where they do this, right? Where they move off Drew Holiday's future money, and another team eats him, such as maybe Atlanta. We looked at Toronto, Dallas, and who was the other team on Drew Holiday last night? Toronto, Dallas, and Sacramento. And even beforehand, we talked about the Clippers. Teams like that. Not necessarily. I mean, some of those teams, they'd have to give up assets like the Mavericks and the Clippers and even the Kings. But if you're looking at Toronto too, but if you're looking at some other rosters out there, Atlanta had some space to eat Porzingis. It could have happened with Holiday, and you could have maybe with Porzingis. Could you have gotten something a little bit different out there? Like what? I just wonder what Porzingis's value would have been straight up as a player, because this move was not made based off of Kristaps Porzingis's value as a player. I should say it was to some degree. Obviously, he's not. If he was Tatum, he would be on the Celtics. He would still be on the Celtics, but ultimately, just in terms of where the Celtics were in terms of salary cutting purposes, it's I just what am I supposed to what am I looking at for Kristaps Porzingis on the market if they're not cutting salary, right? If they're just trading him to trade him, right? To trade him for another good player, right? What type of value could Kristaps Porzingis have mined on the trade market out there? I'm not so certain with this move. We'll never know. We'll never know, because this was a pure cost cutting move, which the Celtics get back a solid player, but I don't think it really mattered which player the Celtics received in return on this deal. If anybody was making $8.2 million, I think the Celtics would have taken him. Obviously, you want a serviceable player to add to your roster who could boost their stock, or maybe you're looking to ink him long term, or he's a piece that comes in. You're looking for that in these deals while you're also shedding salary. But I do wonder what Kristaps Porzingis could have received, what the Celtics could have received for Kristaps Porzingis if they weren't just cutting his salary. But ultimately, could Kristaps Porzingis' peak, could this just be his peak value moving forward, right? We got Niang, right? That's a thing. That's a player. That's a tangible asset. And there's some second round picks going around, right? Have to wait and see if the Celtics moved up or did anything um, with those picks, moved up or we don't know what year those picks come from yet at all. We don't know if the Celtics received the better of the second round picks. If that doesn't, second round picks, people, it doesn't really matter to people necessarily. But sometimes those second round picks, say this year, right? The Celtics own Washington's second round pick. Well, that's pick number 32. It's virtually a first round pick, right? And so that sometimes does matter when swapping around second round picks. But the Celtics did get something tangible for Kristaps Porzingis here. Is it possible in the future they just don't get anything for him, right? At the deadline, or if they let him walk, right? Like Kristaps Porzingis, if they keep him on the roster for this season, right? If the Celtics were to keep Kristaps Porzingis on the roster, is it possible he just walks next offseason and we get rid of his future salary, but we see him walk for absolutely nothing. So in this deal, you do get something tangible if you're the Celtics, and this could be KP's peak value on the market moving forward. And I understand the peak value. Again, I already went over it. I just wonder what that could have looked like if it wasn't just a salary dumping move, because this was both a salary dumping move and it's sort of an asset accumulation move. It's more of a flexibility retaining move, but you do attain another asset within the deal, which could be part of the peak value conversation of Kristaps Porzingis. You're getting something in return for Kristaps Porzingis, but it was always going to be risky to keep Holiday and Porzingis into next season and beyond because you just risk getting nothing for those guys. Holiday in particular, I mean, he could be a guy in which regresses even more so next year and then turns into a player in which you have trouble moving later on down the line instead of actually trading Drew Holiday for Anthony Simons, a 26-year-old Anthony Simons who owns a lot of upside, who will only be 30 years old by the time Drew Holiday is 39 years old. So very risky to take Holiday and Porzingis potentially into the season if you're the Celtics, especially Porzingis if there's more durability concerns and if he demands a higher salary than the Celtics can pay next offseason. Either one of those scenarios plays out, he might walk for nothing in the summer of 2026. So the Celtics, it was always risky to go into the season with Holiday and Porzingis, and now the Celtics have alleviated themselves of that risk and actually cashed it. The Celtics have now cashed in on what could be Holiday and Porzingis's peak value. That's a thing. Um, I mean, the Celtics were going to shed money in this summer anyway. Um, let's see. Yeah, Porzingis's deal. This one, I gotta say, it's not surprising that Porzingis's deal was wound up being the primary money shedding deal, right? Because last night, yes, the Celtics they shed some money with Drew Holiday's contract, but it wasn't a ton. It was about $5 million, and that actually saved. We talked about earlier the luxury tax implications of all this. So earlier mentioned, well, it's not just 8 million. To say you're trading away Sam Hauser, you get rid of $10 million. It's not just $10 million you're getting rid of. You're getting rid of a lot more money on top of that because owners are paying X percentage on top of every single luxury tax dollar in which a team goes over. Well, Holiday, he saved the Celtics just $5 million on their books. However, the ownership, he saved them about $40 million last night. $40 million, and that has nothing to do with contracts. Can we sign it? No, that's out of the owner's pocket. All right, we're talking about the owner's pocket. Got to think of it in like two different standards of money or pools of money. I don't know. I don't know how to correctly convey that without a picture, right? In words here, but you have the owner's money, right? You have the team salary cap, and that is the team, right? The team. They're not being paid by the owner, they're being paid by the league revenue. Essentially, that's where the the players' money comes from, is the league revenue, right? And the teams, every single team has a pot of league revenue to give out to players. That's how it works. The owners, on the other hand, they make their money via the local TV deals. They get league revenue as well based on the national TV deal, merchandise, ticket sales, all of that, right? And even other business ventures owners have out there, we all know. But that money is not what the payer that not that money right there is not what the players are paid with. All right. It's the league revenue, it's the pot, right? But when I talk about the luxury tax and teams going over and a team or a team ownership group needing to pay the luxury tax, it's coming from all of their own money. It's not coming from the pot of the league revenue, right? I don't know how else to kind of give that out there. But ultimately, talking about the Holiday and Porzingis moves, Holiday, he saved the Celtics ownership $40 million. This Porzingis move saves the Celtics. I mean, feels like I want to say I want to say this move actually saves the Celtics maybe $100 million. Their luxury tax, but like it is maybe that. I believe it could be upwards of that number right there. Is near $100 million on this deal coming from the Celtics ownership side, right? Um, But I think Porzingis, you look at the two deals, right? Holiday only shedded $5 million off the salary cap. Porzingis, he sheds, we did the math earlier, what it was $30.7 million. What it was 30.7, and then you have Niang's 8.2. So it was about 22, $23 million, which the Celtics saved towards the salary cap on this deal. I think just looking at it, Porzingis' deal was a little easier to shed salary with than Holiday's because of the future implications of the deal, right? Porzingis, Atlanta, they're taking a flyer on Porzingis. He's going to be $30.7 million of expiring money next year. They might they might flip him again. They might buy him out later on in time. They might trade him at the deadline. They might re-sign him long term. They might let him walk for nothing. They're taking a flyer on him at $30.7 million. There's so many different routes in which Atlanta could go down right now with Kristaps Porzingis. As for Drew Holiday, that's not the same. Drew Holiday's owed $37 million 3 seasons from now, and that's not a player you're taking a flyer on. That's a player bringing into your organization and thinking, well, he's going to be here for a while and he's going to play for us, right? He that and Holiday, yes, you could flip him too if you wanted to, but he's owed more future money. He is more of a concrete asset over time than Kristaps Porzingis, who is going to be a free agent by this time next year and could flock off anyway. I mean, he could re-sign with Atlanta, could move on elsewhere, could be traded at the deadline. Atlanta could flip him again. You really never know what can happen with Porzingis here, and I think that's just why that's why he was much easier to sell than Drew Holiday, and it's mainly the expiring money within that. Holiday does make a little bit more cash just up front as well. You could say that, but the Holiday future money less teams who are willing to eat money or willing to take flyers on players, they're not taking flyers on guys with $37 million 3 years from now. They're not, eating money from guys who are owed $37 million 3 seasons from now. Porzingis, another story in all of this. Also, I will say this: the Celtics, Porzingis, he could completely outplay his value next year of where he's at right now. And I think that's likely going to be the case for at least a part of the season. I think we're going to look at Porzingis next year, as long as he doesn't have a major injury or anything like that. I think we're going to look at Porzingis next year and go, I think he's actually worth something in the offseason, right? I think he's going to actually get something in the offseason, 2026, rather, from another team in terms of salary. It's possible next year if the Celtics brought Porzingis back into the fray, Porzingis outplays his value and then demands a salary number higher than the Celtics can actually pay him, and then all of a sudden he's walking for nothing. So Porzingis could have came back with the Celtics next year, and the Celtics make other salary moves with, say, Sam Hauser and others on the roster. Uh, could have came back and outplayed his value and then signed elsewhere, and the Celtics get nothing from him. That was possible. That was a possibility with Kristaps Porzingis on the roster. We already kind of reiterated. That's a reiteration of what we said earlier. Yeah, I mean, his future price tag could also be beyond the worth of his availability. I just think about that with Porzingis. Sometimes players, like, here's your status, here's your skill, what's the availability look like, right? What is the, and I even look at, what does the personality behind the scenes look like? Sometimes it's squared away by the time players are getting these massive deals, but sometimes it's not. We'll get Hassan Whiteside a long time ago. But Porzingis' future price tag on the market could be a little bit beyond the actual worth of his availability. And with that in mind, be a little weary if the Celtics, I'd be a little weary if I were the Celtics of paying him more money considering his availability concerns, because if you're already hampered, if you're the Celtics, from making other moves, why would you overpay for Porzingis if you don't know if he's going to be available? So that future implication, I think, also played a factor in the Celtics dealing away Kristaps Porzingis here. And just, you could lose Kristaps Porzingis for absolutely nothing in 2026 free agency. But I had a bunch of bullet points too on why not? Why the Celtics wouldn't move off of Kristaps Porzingis. All these reasons fell through. Okay, after this deal, all these reasons fell through, and I'll bring these up anyway to spur them off to other points here. But the Celtics center rotation. This is a reason as to why the Celtics could have kept Kristaps Porzingis going into next year. The Celtics center rotation right now, we already went over it earlier on this live. Horford is 39. Okay, he's a free agent. Cornette is a free agent. Kada and Tillman, they're the only two bigs right now. Kristaps Porzingis, and just looking at those two guys, right? You have all these guys. Horford's 39. Cornette might be completely, he might be out the door. He might be demanding more than $10 million. The Celtics might not be able to pay Luke Cornette. Kada, he's still a raw player at 25 who we're thinking, okay, you're 25, 26 years old. You're still raw. Yes, there's some upside here, but how much further on along in his career, what is the level he's actually going to reach in his NBA career? I highly question that for certain with Neemias Queta. And then Tillman, he was just a non-factor last season. I don't know why anybody would think he has bricks for feet. I don't know why anybody would think he's going to come in and make this crazy starting center level of impact with the Celtics. So the center rotation right now for the Celtics is brutal. I think a move is certainly on the way for the Celtics there, whether it's for the free agency, another trade, the draft. I think the draft is probably the most likely where the Celtics address that, although they need a starting center, right? It's not just let's draft a center and we'll slot him in as the third guy. Nope, it's you're looking at a situation where you need a starting center if you're the Celtics. You're not looking at a third string big man or a second string big man, or in the past, do we need a fourth guy? Nope. Nope. You need a starting center right now if you're the Celtics. Maybe that's Cornette, but even then, I just think Cornette and Al Horford, along with Kada and Tillman, that center rotation was getting demolished against the Knicks in the playoffs last year. So going ahead into the future with the same center rotation, you got to make some upgrades. You got to make some changes. I think Horford's going to be back. I think Kate is going to be back. Tillman, I think you could see the Celtics sell. Cornette could walk in free agency. Now you're left with two big men. From my viewpoint on this, the most likely scenario here, I would say you might have to make another move. Maybe are you going to address your starting center spot in the draft? It's very possible, but the Celtics, it almost feels like they would need to maybe move up from 28 and 32 to actually secure a nice starting center. Maybe like and this is even, I don't know, you are you banking on Thomas Sorber and Jawan Behringer to be starting centers right away? Because that's the range of a big guy in which the Celtics could go out and potentially get. And even then, I like Behringer. I really do. Sorber, he's moving up the draft board. So even those guys, maybe they go in the lottery. Maybe they go a little too high in the draft for the Celtics to go out and get. And even then, it's like, I don't know. I don't know if those guys, 19, 20 years old, Sorber might be a little older than that, but I don't know if those guys are going to come in and be starters right away, right? You need a starting center here if you're the Celtics. The long-term team-friendly extension potential after the $30.7 million in 25-26 was always there with Porzingis. However, The Celtics just couldn't make it past this $30 million contract in order to actually get to that point of Porzingis signing to a team-friendly deal over time. So from that perspective, unfortunately, the $30 million before that certainly played into. But here's the thing with that scenario. So the Celtics would have to make it through the $30.7 million season. But furthermore, the Celtics, okay, if they make it through the season, right? And if he's on a long-term team-friendly deal, that means he didn't have that great of a season. So he didn't have that great of a season, but he's taking a long-term friendly deal, right? But he's maybe not durable, didn't have a great season, whatever it is, right? Could be injury, could be performance, could be both with Porzingis, who knows? If you're signing him to a long-term team-friendly extension, are you still overpaying him? I mean, I know I said team-friendly, but are you still overpaying him if he didn't perform last season and then you're signing him long-term after that, right? And then on the other side of the spectrum is what if Porzingis plays so well next season to the point where he outplays his worth with the C's, and they can't sign him back because he's demanding 25, even $30 million again from another team. And the Celtics look at that and go, well, that's impossible to pay. Absolutely impossible. So you have both ends of the spectrum on that. Either for the team friendly deal aspect, it's the team friendly deal aspect, would he have put forth the value on court to justify extending him beyond next summer, right? And then on the other end, you have, well, if he put forth the value, he might walk for nothing. So bottom line there. And yeah, again, Porzingis could have added more value or stock to from where it dwindled to a low point this past playoff run and even after the playoff run. But I would say next season, you could have looked at, we have a Raptor visit here. We have a Raptor. Anytime you see that, folks, first of all, let's get everything back up here. And we're going to bring, I don't even know who we're bringing in right now. Is it Griffin?
It's Griffin.
Franco, it's Griffin. I know it's one of you guys in here. I
Oh,
was going over, you came in at a perfect time because this next bullet point, the Celtics may need to give up picks to move off Porzingis. That didn't need to happen. Great for the Celtics there. Value was at an all-time low with the Celtics. I think we kind of see that with Porzingis a little bit here. Although I questioned, Porzingis maybe what kind of value if you weren't just shedding the salary? But yeah, we'll talk about a little bit more about all the points I was getting to here. But Griffin, first of all, we got I already told the viewership here, right? I already told the viewership. I already told them we were in a recording, right? We were in a recording when this trade went down, and we had initial thoughts and reactions on that recording. And it's 2 days in a row now, Griffin, which we're on high alert now. We're on live. It always happened. Like, you realize right now, we're on high alert. Okay. The last 24 hours, we were on live, and technically we were recording the second time, but we were recording twice, right? And we reacted live to both the Porzingis and Drew Holiday deals. Uh,
yeah.
but Kristaps Porzingis, you see here the news, bring it up on screen yet again. Kristaps Porzingis, this is not the news. Here you go. Nope, this is both the same tweet. Am I what? Is this? I guess nope. See, this is where you got to go to the iPad over here. You got to go to the iPad when your phone's not working. You got to go over to the iPad and get it up here. So here we go. Here's the tweet. This is the tweet right here from Shams Charania. Breaking: Boston, Atlanta, and Brooklyn are finalizing a 3-team trade that sends Kristaps Porzingis and a second-round pick to the Hawks, Terrence Mann, and Atlanta's number 22 overall pick to the Nets, and Georges Niang and a second-rounder to the Celtics. That news coming out this afternoon, and we reacted to it on the podcast, which is coming out. However, Griffin, your first initial reactions on the Kristaps Porzingis trade and the Celtics receiving Georges Niang in return.
Oh, I will say this. I was so depressed when I heard that on the podcast that we were just filming. And you'll see Coach AJ and I got into more reactions of it at the end. But now that I can kind of come on here and fully collect myself after this trade, I'm heartbroken. I really am. I love Porzingis. One of he was up there for one of my favorite players on that current Celtics team, and will go down as one of my favorite Celtics players of all time, because just that connection I made with him, meeting him in person, and just the fact that, we gave up Marcus Smart for him, and I just loved him on the Boston Celtics. But it's heartbreaking, but it's the fact that we're under the second apron now, and it's like, all right, you already mentioned it, Seamus. The return was super low. He's at a point in his career where you're not gonna get a big player for him. It's just realistic. You're not gonna get an all-star player for him. You're gonna have to lose the trade, especially where his salary is, giving up picks and stuff like that. You're gonna have to get a lower, person for him. I'm definitely upset because I think the value that you could have potentially got for him, I think when he's healthy and active, like, obviously this is in a crazy world, but you could totally get a Nick Claxton out of a Porzingis if it's a healthy Porzingis. However, he is not healthy, and the return you're getting is a lot lower. I feel like there definitely was a lot better options out there for a return. However, it's the best case because you look at it, you're under the second apron, you get Georges Niang. Will Georges Niang be a permanent member of? No.
Okay, we don't have more breaking news, but we do have a rumor that just dropped. Okay,
No,
we do have a rumor.
I can't do it, Seamus.
We do have a rumor. It's just a rumor, all right, Griffin. It's just a rumor. It's not breaking news, so we
I
don't have to
can't.
get crazy.
Seamus, my heart just sank, bro. You're
I
really.
understand. I understand. But here we go.
I'm
So
finished.
via Legion Hoops, via Steve B Hoop, who, giving out some of these rumors over the time, right? The Celtics are aggressively trying to land a lottery pick for tomorrow's draft, per Steve B Hoop via Legion Hoops.
Okay, but
So
who do you give up
woo,
for that? But who do you get? No, that's what frustrates me
you would
because.
have to give up 28 and 32. All right,
Mhm.
28 and 32, or at least 28. Right, at least 28, at probably 32 as well. You're probably giving up a future first. All right, if you're the Celtics, you're giving up a future first. You're probably giving up Sam Hauser for sure.
Definitely.
So Sam Hauser, 3 first-round picks to move up into the lottery. I don't know if that's enough. Would you need Pritchard? Would you need
No, and that's where I'm
Tatum?
stopping this.
Shireman? Shireman? I'm just saying.
No,
I like Shireman as an
no,
option moving forward.
no.
I'm
That's
sorry, yeah.
that's
Shireman, I want to see next year because I think he
where I'm
could be a
stopping.
good role player.
Yeah, that's where I'm stopping this because Baylor Shireman, I just talked about with Coach AJ too. I think Baylor Shireman is a player that is a safe name on the Celtics, considering he's cheap.
Well,
For one, he's cheap. For two, you don't know what you could get out of him next year becoming more of a player. However, I'm shutting that down because I think this. I think I'm open to it if it's Hauser and our picks and future picks. However, if we're talking, you have to give up a player like Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, or Jaylen Brown. I am not open to that. I think you're under the second apron now. You made the move with moving off of Porzingis. All right, you had to do that. You had to get rid of Holiday. Those are two names on the chopping block. Now Sam Hauser is the next potential name. I am not open to moving a Jaylen Brown, Derek White, or Peyton Pritchard. Obviously, Tatum's off the table. I think Baylor's a safe name. I'm not opening to move any of those options because I'm hurt as a Celtic. I'm not hurt. I have trust in Brad, but it's a move where I love now that we're under the second apron. All right, great. But it's like, what can we do from now? And I'm going to quote a take that Coach AJ just said is Brad Stevens is already 2 to 3 moves ahead of us right now. Like, obviously, we're thinking right now in the current time, but Brad Stevens already has a plan, and he's already working behind the scenes. I guarantee before that Porzingis trade too, he's like, all right, we're going to get under the luxury tax, then we're going to do this. And I'm excited to see what his future steps are, but I'm not open to doing that move. But can I?
go ahead, Griffin. Go.
But no, you go ahead because I'll finish my take on this.
Well, no, because if you have a question, I don't want to run over this question because this is going to get off into a tangent that's not about Porzingis necessarily, and it's about potentially moving up in the draft. All right. It's about moving up in the draft because I understand Anthony Simons. I would be more inclined to keep Anthony Simons long term than, he's an expiring, so you're going to have to sign him if you're the Celtics long term, if you want to keep him long term. But is there a possibility the Celtics move off Anthony Simons to go and move up in the draft and go and get somebody? And maybe with Simons, maybe his $27 million, maybe they try to cut something off of that. Maybe they go get a $20 million player, and they go move up into the lottery. The Celtics do, or even in the draft. Maybe the report said lottery, but it could be just in the draft in general. Maybe they move just outside of the lottery if a guy falls. But do you consider maybe giving up a Simons for another player and a lottery pick, along with, say, Sam Hauser? And that's important now as well. Is you have players on your roster and first round picks. I want to add on to that as well. You probably going to have to give up first round picks if you're going to move up if you're the Celtics. But this is an important point after this Porzingis trade, in which it just opens up so many possibilities for the Celtics that we need to be wary of now moving into draft night tomorrow night. The Celtics getting out of the second apron, they get out of the second apron 24 hours before the draft. You can aggregate Simons, you can aggregate Sam Hauser, Georges Niang, all together and come up with, oh, well, there goes Griffin. Uh, you can come up, with a pretty big number for all of those guys. All right, I'm talking here individually. Let's do. Yeah, his computer just died. Well, hey, we both. It happens to both of us because I can't lie. My phone died when we were on the podcast earlier, and it worked out because we had to go over and do this live. But it happens to the best of us. But all of those salaries, right? Just doing it from a raw perspective, not concerning the decimals necessarily. So yeah, basically 27 in Anthony Simons, 8 in Niang, and 10 in Sam Hauser. That's basically $45 million. It's going to be $45+ million. It's going to be above that with the hundreds of thousands of dollars added onto the end, the couple extra added onto the end there. 40, 45, 46, 47 in that range of salary now, in which you can aggregate in trades if you're the Celtics, right? You $45 million between those three guys, Niang, Simons, and Hauser. You could do something with that if you're the Celtics. And if you have some picks here, you just got back a second round pick in the holiday deal. You get back a second round pick in the we have all right. We have more news. Not exactly crazy news here, but breaking: the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas Mavericks nine-time NBA All-Star Kyrie Irving is declining his $43 million player option and intends to sign a 3-year, $119 million contract with the Dallas Mavericks. So we expected this. Kyrie Irving back with the Mavericks, declined his $43 million player option, signed for another $119 million. Congratulations to Kyrie. When he was in Brooklyn, it seemed as if at the end of his Brooklyn tenure, the questions certainly surrounded him of whether he or not he would get another big deal in the NBA. Well, he does with the Mavericks. After after the Nets traded Kyrie to the Mavericks, got another big deal there. Received another big deal from the Mavericks, and now does it yet again. So Kyrie, certainly a good turnaround to see there from where he was with the Nets and even the Celtics, and the reputation he had there. Certainly has turned around his reputation by a long shot. But 119 for 3 years, that's $39.6 million per year. So basically, Kyrie Irving takes a $4 million Kyrie Irving takes a $4 million pay cut next year to make 39 in the future in 2 more years. So he's adding on. We already. This is the obvious. This is an obvious move. You forego the initial 1 year salary. You add the salary back with the extension in that 1 year, and you add on 2 3 years to that extension beyond that. So that's what Kyrie. That's what the Mavericks and Kyrie Irving they've agreed upon now. So that news just came out. Not huge. Might as well cover it. Kyrie extension. back with the Mavericks. Talking about the Mavericks. We were talking about Cooper Flag earlier today with Coach AJ from SMCC, and which is good. Great pod, by the way. We got, when that releases, I'm sure it might have already released over on Celtics Nation Rise, but great pod. Everybody go check that out. Some great insight in there from Coach AJ. Phenomenal guest for our program, I must say, every time he comes on. But the Dallas Mavericks, we were talking about them earlier. They secure Kyrie for next season. Okay. So that just went down. Reacted to that news. We were just on a roll reacting to news here on live. But ultimately, the conversation beforehand was about the aggregation of salaries. And we're waiting for Griffin. We'll see if he comes back here, and we'll talk to him more about this subject. However, the salaries in which go out for the Celtics, it now puts the Celtics under the second apron. The Celtics can now aggregate salary. Can you get something out of Simons? Can you get something out of Niang? Can you get something out of Sam Hauser while aggregating those players together? And less so Simons, I would say $27 million. Maybe you cut again, do you cut some money off of his deal and move him again and get somebody else for him? I don't know. He's 26 years old. When I look at the acquisition of Simons, he's a player I look at and go, I think the Celtics have intentions of potentially keeping him long term because of his age, right? You just traded a 35-year-old Drew Holiday for a 26-year-old Anthony Simons. Simons is going to be only 30 years old when Drew Holiday is 39. You have a lot of time there for Anthony Simons to play ball with the Celtics. Now he has to sign an extension or over the summer next year when he's a free agent with the Celtics. That'll be a whole thing when it comes to that date. But he's more of a player I'm looking at the Celtics keeping long term. Meanwhile, Hauser, Niang, they are very expendable in my mind. $10 million, $8.2 million. You can put those salaries together, get an $18 million player out there on the market. And if you're trying to move up in the draft, I would think Hauser, Picks, Niang, are those players all part of it? A lot of directions in which the Celtics could go right now. They might not be done selling the players in which, and I don't want to say selling, but trading the players in which they just received and acquired for Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday. And we just had a report come out. The Celtics are aggressively looking to move up into the draft lottery, in which we've talked about in the recent weeks. We talked about it and thrown it around a little bit. The Celtics could move up or not. Seems as if they see somebody within the lottery, the top 14 of the draft, that they want to go out and get. Very interesting for the Celtics, especially now that they can aggregate salaries. They have a couple of new salaries in the building and still some salaries in there. And, a salary I didn't mention in this whole entire equation is Peyton Pritchard, $7 million. Again, the value there with him, the value, you just don't want to trade Peyton Pritchard because he is way on court. He is worth $20+ million. That's where Peyton Pritchard is. He's probably close to a $20 million player, and yet he's making $7.7 million. That is tremendous value if you're the Celtics. And so that's why I don't add Pritchard into that whole mix. Same thing with Shireman. I think his value on court is just a little more than his salary is going to be over the next couple of years. And Pritchard's deal is actually $7.2 million. But regardless, around that $7 million mark. So yeah, I mean, I right now you have Tatum, Brown. They're making them beyond $50 million. It would be a blockbuster if any of them were moved, especially, Jaylen Brown is the name everybody's throwing around. Tatum, it's impossible. $71.4 million in 29-30 for a player who just tore his Achilles. So let's see, he'll be 27, 28, 29, 30. So in his 31-year-old season, right? Be age 31. He's making $71.4 million, and he just tore his Achilles. Teams aren't trading for that contract right now. I'm sure teams, they would want Jason Tatum, but it's like, what are they ultimately, I'm sorry, Jason. Why are we even talking about this? Jason Tatum is not. The Celtics are not trading away Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown, who knows? I don't think so, but you never know on that front. Talked a lot about it in the past. but those two guys are going to be safe. Pritchard and Shireman, I would think, are safe names, 7.2, 2.6. Again, if you wanted to move up in the draft, if teams really wanted them and you really wanted somebody in that top 15 range, that top 14 range in the lottery, maybe you consider moving off one of them. But again, the value with Pritchard and Shireman are it's too much to move off of if you're the Celtics. Pritchard, again, he's a $20 million player, essentially making $7 million. And Shireman, he could turn into a $10 million player, making $2 million. So you want to add that value onto your roster because you're getting more production than what you're actually paying for, which is efficiency, right? Derek White, $28.1 million. He's not safe at all. He could definitely be moved, but I think he would be the player. If you wanted to get the most out of anybody, it would be Derek White. So don't rule that out at all for the Celtics if they really wanted to get frisky here, but otherwise, people think he's likely going to be on the roster next year. That leaves Hauser, Tillman, Keita, Davison, Walsh, and Simons and Niang. Okay. Simons and Niang, got to add them in as well. They're not on the salary sheet yet. Okay. The visual of them isn't there. You got to mentally put them in the into the equation. But those guys, you have Simons, Niang, Hauser, Tillman, Keita, Davison, Walsh, in which you could all aggregate together, right? And come up with a pretty massive salary number in which you could move around and maybe you move up in the draft lottery. Maybe you move up into the draft lottery if you're the Celtics. Maybe you go out and get another role player or another starter if you're the Celtics. Who knows? There's a lot of moves still here on the table. Right now could go into the season with Niang, Hauser, Shireman, Brown as your forward rotation and let one of those guys fall out of the rotation later on in the season before trading him, most likely Niang at the deadline, or he could be moved before the summer is even over. I got to say, he could be moved before the summer is even over. But let's do the quick math here on all these salaries. So bringing up Simon's salary, because he's on the Blazers payroll right now. The sheet, right? The sheet matters here. Let's see. So Simons, oh, nice, pulled it up right away. $27.7 million. You have Hauser, $10 million. You have Niang, 8.2. Let's see, $8.2 million. And let's see, who else do we have within this equation here? All right. Tillman, you have what? 2.5. Wait. Okay. So let's see what kind of number we come up with here. Adding up all these players. So you have Simons, you have Niang, your two new additions, you have Hauser, and then you have the rest. You have 2.5 in Tillman, you have 2.3 in Keita, 2.3 in Davison, and 2.2 in Walsh. Okay. Couldn't really see those salaries there. They have $55 million, around $55 million in salary if you're the Celtics to go out and aggregate for a potential trade, whether it's an upgrade to the roster or moving up in the draft lottery. That's a pretty substantial salary number to move for the Celtics. So a lot of fluidity here for the C's. But this was a pure salary move for the Celtics. I want to say, though, on the other side of this, the Atlanta Hawks, they didn't have a center. Onyeka Okongwu is their only center. You could say Mohamed Gueye, but he's down on the roster. He's a very young guy on the Atlanta Hawks roster. But there is still some value here for Kristaps Porzingis. He's only 30 years old. It's not like he's 34. He's 30, right? That's certainly a positive with Kristaps Porzingis. He'll be 32 in 2020 or 28, 29. He'll only be 32. So you look at that, the next 3 seasons, he's 30, 31, 32. Later on down the line, 32, that 28, 29, he's only 32 years old. He's not 35. He's not Drew Holiday, essentially. There's still upside with not Drew Holiday. There's still upside with Drew Holiday defensively anyway. But Kristaps Porzingis, there's still upside in him to be a top 10 big in the NBA. There's still, you look at the unicorn, right? His ability on the court. He still owns the upside to be a top 10 big in the league, and he's still impactful when engaged. Okay. as everybody is in this world, but he's still impactful when he is engaged, right? He's still impactful every single time in which Porzingis is actually healthy and he's actually all there within the game, ready to play. It's not necessarily as, concerns of him showing up or anything like that, but um when he actually is healthy and plays with an increased motivation, he's still a very valuable player. That's how I view Kristaps Porzingis. Kristaps Porzingis here. Let's see. Where's the next bullet point? What do I have here? So Kristaps Porzingis, and this was another point why let's see. Just going through some notes here because Celtics. Well, I guess we're done with those bullet points. I don't know if we have another one on here that really makes sense to give out. Celtics. I mean, yeah, the Celtics may. Okay, well, let's give out this viewpoint. This is a good bullet point. This kind of ends the Kristaps Porzingis bullet points, and I just used all those from our potential Kristaps Porzingis live, but yeah, I just turned them into trade reaction here. But Kristaps Porzingis, right? It's possible if the Celtics don't move Kristaps, they don't get under the second apron, they don't shed the proper salary in which they want to shed, and it was essentially this Porzingis deal could be looked at as it was essential to move on from Kristaps Porzingis from a salary shedding standpoint. If the Celtics weren't willing to do that, maybe they bite the bullet next year, in which makes absolutely no sense for the team's direction and the roster. But I do want to go and look at. I looked. Well, I kind of explained the Atlanta side a little bit. They don't have a big. They have the money to spend, and Georges Niang, very small price to pay for Kristaps Porzingis. I mean, I think Atlanta fans are looking at this going, "Wow, we turned DeAndre Hunter into Terrence Mann and Georges Niang, who we then turned into Kristaps Porzingis. That's not terrible for the Hawks. I would, Hunter Porzingis. I would rather take a flyer on Porzingis because although Hunter could be a more durable player, a more reliable player, a more versatile player, a player in which you could slot into a rotation easier than Porzingis, right? You can play him in a couple different spots next to different teammates and in lineup combinations. DeAndre Hunter versus Porzingis. Sometimes you're not necessarily playing him next to certain big guys per se. But if you turn DeAndre Hunter into Porzingis, it's not a terrible thing to do if you're the Hawks, because the Hawks they haven't been a relevant team in the past couple of years. I mean, I understand they've been in the mix in the play-in, but ever since that conference finals run, they've been going essentially nowhere. They've been a pure 500 team. They've been the poster child for 500 teams, and they're still there. And now they give up Niang and Terrence Mann. Here's who Atlanta has on the roster right now. You have Trae Young making $46 million. You have Jalen Johnson making $30 million. Those are your top contracts, along with Kristaps Porzingis now. So you have 46 and Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, $30 million, and now Kristaps Porzingis with $30 million himself down in Atlanta. After that, they gave up Terrence Mann and Georges Niang, but you have Onyeka Okongwu at $15 million. You have Zachary Risache at $13.2 million on the roster. And then you have Dyson Daniels, a very, very promising young guy who's not only promising, I mean, he's extremely talented, especially defensive young guy. $7.7 million for Dyson Daniels. Kobe Bufkin, $4.5 million. And then 2.3 for Vit Krejci, 2.3 for Dominic Barlow, and Mo Gay, 2.2. Okay, and I feel like I've been saying his name. I believe his name is Mohammed Gay. Maybe not Mohammed Gueye. I believe the broadcast. Like you hear these things, you go, I'm pretty sure It's like this. It looks like Gueye might be Mohammed Gay. I'm just saying, but the Atlanta roster. I'm not really exact. I'm not. I. Here's the thing. I'm not exactly sure what Atlanta's direction is right now. I would be a little mindful over a Trae Young move. It looks like Atlanta, they're on the precipice of could they reset? Could they do a hard reset here? You have Trae Young and Porzingis, huge contracts at the top of your roster. If you're Atlanta, do you look to maybe move off them, or you may be looking off to with Porzingis specifically, you may be looking to move off future money? Trae Young is due an extension in the future pretty soon here. And that becomes a question for Atlanta. What type of money are you willing to give Trae Young in the future? Because he is an all-star level player, but I think a lot of people around the league understand Trae Young. If he's on your roster making 45 plus $1 million, it's going to be pretty hard to build a championship level team around somebody who demands the ball offensively, huge usage on that side, yet defensively is a negative. I mean, he's a negative defensive player. That's always going to be tough when you're negative on one end of the floor. Trae Young's an elite offensive player. Don't get me wrong, but defensively, no, I wouldn't want him on my roster, especially for the money in which he's making. So, huge question coming up with Trae Young in Atlanta, and ultimately Porzingis. He comes in there and he's an expiring deal. So, if you're Atlanta, if you trade away Trae Young and Porzingis just his deal goes expired, you're looking at Jalen Johnson, Okongwu, Risa Shea, Dyson Daniels, Bufkin, Krejci, Barlow, Gueye. I mean, those are your players. And I go, well, what is this roster exactly doing? Oh, hello, Griffin.
Hello,
Welcome
Shane.
back.
I'm back.
Well,
I'm sorry, my computer died.
Welcome back. I was just talking about the Atlanta Hawks and Porzingis' fit into the Hawks. They do need a big man next season, but I just don't know where this roster is going. I don't. Their level of competitiveness seems like kind of seems like a play-in team level roster. But then again, the East is completely weak next year. You could see them move into the upper echelon of the East very easily with a couple more moves here. But Atlanta, are they teetering on the brink of potentially selling and hitting the hard reset button? Hitting the hard reset button and potentially tanking into the future. It's possible with Atlanta. Atlanta, what was I going to say about Atlanta here? The direction of the team. This is what I was going to say. The direction of the team doesn't make a ton of sense to me right now uh, from the Atlanta perspective, but I'm in favor of Atlanta doing something different, right? The last couple of years, they kept similar rosters around. I mean, even looking at some of the names on the roster right now, I mean, they've made some changes, but Kongwu, Jalen Johnson, those are two guys they want to keep, but just Capella, DeAndre Hunter, it's like the Trae Young era. It's like, can we just do something different? The 2021 Hawks are long gone. Okay, we're nearly 5 years removed from that point, and it's well, we made the conference finals, but they've been a 500 team. Afterwards, they were in that 2021 season. It was a one-off. It was let's face it, it was a one-off season where they made the conference finals. They beat the Sixers, and you look back at that Sixers roster and go, that Sixers roster wasn't amazing. I mean, they were the number one seed, but they weren't all that in a bag of chips in a weird 2021 season with no fans. It started on Christmas and everything that went along with that season. The Hawks are long gone from that moment. They've been a 500 team since that moment. I'm in favor of them doing something different. I'm in favor of them taking a different direction than just stand pat. Let's stay a playing team. Let's not be too aggressive. Atlanta, they've been aggressive. They traded away DeAndre Hunter for Terrence Mann and Georges Niang, and then they traded away Terrence Mann and Georges Niang for Kristaps Porzingis. That's being aggressive if you're Atlanta, and I think there could be more moves on the way here for Atlanta. I would say Okongwu, Risa Shea, Daniels are probably safe in Atlanta. Even Jalen Johnson, I would say those are the safe names. Everybody else, even Trae Young, Porzingis, everybody's on the table for moves. But also simply in the future, the Hawks maybe letting Porzingis go expired, letting his future money go. They're taking a flyer on him, saving future money in that way if they don't sign him long term. The Hawks, they might be. I can't tell if this is a soft rebuild. I can't tell if this is a let's retool and try to get competitive, or this is the start of a complete tear down and tank. I'm not exactly certain where Atlanta's going, but I'm glad they're finally inching towards any direction, right? Any direction. Like I'm just not down with Atlanta doing nothing this offseason. I don't think that was ever going to be the case. But
Yeah,
Griffin, as you come back here, what are your thoughts on the Atlanta Hawks and Kristaps Porzingis and the entire situation in which I was just talking about here?
Well, it still hurts. Like I am, with the Anthony Simons one, you look at that with Drew Holiday, and you look at that trade, you're like, oh, it sucks. All right, Drew Holiday, you're the reason we won the championship. Loved having you here in Boston, but you're like, oh, we're getting Anthony Simons. That's a good move. Brad finessed with that one. You got a younger player, and gave up an older guy who, at his top trade peak value. However, with Porzingis, it's not the same look. He's been dealing with that upper respiratory infection and things like that, that illness, that viral illness that we've been talking about, those injuries, constant injuries. And, you essentially won Banner 18 without Kristaps Porzingis. But it just sucks because I feel like it's essentially like trading Marcus Smart again. It was bittersweet because you were getting Porzingis, and you got this big man who could give you a lot of greatness, in Boston, and you got rid of Smart, and you're like, all right, well, we got rid of the heart of Boston. Then you trade Porzingis, and Porzingis filled the shoes of Marcus Smart the best he could. He was a people's person. He got into the crowd. Like, what did he say with the dog thing? What was that? What was his quote he had with that? You know what I'm
Who,
talking
Marcus Smart?
No, Porzingis.
I don't remember.
Something like that, but something fun. But
No.
he got cut on the eye.
He had a
And
million. He had a million quotes about the crowd and
yeah,
Boston. And
Boston loved him, and Porzingis loved Boston. I think this was the most fun he had playing in a career. In his career, this is the most fun he's had playing for a team. I think winning that championship and having fun, cookies and cream with him and Jaylen Brown. So it's hard to let him go in Atlanta. It's like, oh, but a healthy Porzingis, and I look at it this way: if he could have a healthy season, it's going to be kind of like a Wizards Porzingis. I feel like you're going to get that version of Porzingis where he could give you a lot. And when he played for Washington, he gave you quite a bit when he was healthy. And I think it might be like one of those situations where he falls into Atlanta, and, they're obviously not one of the most competitive teams. However, it's a wide open East, and they can make a run. And Porzingis, I think he's trying to build up his trade value now, not even trade value, but now in Atlanta, he's going to want a contract now. Obviously, you said he's going to be expiring free agent, so he's going to be wanting to look for a contract. So when he's on the court, it's not like he's going to be giving it garbage time. No, he's going to be to try to get a contract or try to go to another competitive team to compete for a championship. So it's not even garbage minutes for Kristaps Porzingis. From a Celtics perspective with Georges Niang, I do like what Coach AJ said. As I talked about earlier, I was on a podcast with Coach AJ and Seamus before this, and he is right. Georges Niang could be a gritty, tough player. So you look at that.
no, he goes from automatically, in my mind, one of the most hated Celtics rivals individually to maybe one of the more beloved Celtics players. And it's possible he doesn't even play a game in Boston. It's possible he's rerouted elsewhere, and it's
I
possible
would
he's
like that.
just an expiring contract in which the Celtics move off of at the deadline, and we don't see much of him. But there's a world here where Georges Niang comes in the building amidst the personality in which we know he has out on the basketball floor, which is competitive. The story that I will always be reminded of when it comes to Georges Niang is every time his name comes up, it's the story of him keeping the lock screen of himself at Iowa State when they lost to, I believe, UAB, the University of Alabama Birmingham, right, in the first round as a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. I believe all of that information is correct, but regardless, the story was Georges Niang and the Iowa State Cyclones. They were knocked out of the first round of the tournament, and after that, Georges Niang puts that moment as his lock screen in order to become motivated for the next season and beyond and into his NBA career. I mean, that kind of stuff right there. I'm looking at that to give yourself motivation. It's like that's some Joe Mazzulla level stuff right there.
Yeah.
It's like Joe Mazzulla and Georges Niang, they might like each other. It's like they might actually hate each other with how competitive they are. Like they might go against each other. I don't really think that's the case. But
No, but can I say
Georges Niang's personality, I think, is going to fit in Boston if he actually plays in Boston. And if the Celtics, he's on an $8.2 million expiring deal, he could command less than 8.2 next year. And you never know. He's maybe our ninth, 10th, 11th man. Could be a good ninth, 10th, 11th man for the Celtics as a forward. We need more forwards on this roster, especially now with Tatum gone. And Georges Niang, I will say, I think he could be a player that could be around long term, and he could just be a player, not a starter, not a beloved starter, but a beloved bench player, a beloved role player, and somebody that the Celtics keep around in their locker room for that addition of culture that he brings. I mean, I
well,
want
yeah.
personalities like Georges Niang in my locker room. I hate playing against him, right? I'll say, like, we're playing against Georges Niang. It's like F Georges Niang, but if he's playing for us, it's like, oh, that's like Marcus Smart, right? It's like if you're any other team, you hate playing against Marcus Smart, right? But if you actually, as we know, Marcus Smart's on your team, that's a whole different advantage for your team. It's not just a statistical advantage, it's not a physical advantage, it's an emotional advantage, it's a spiritual advantage. And that is what the Celtics are getting in Georges Niang at the very least, unless
Yeah.
they of course move him elsewhere before the start of the season, which is completely possible.
No, that is totally possible, and I think that's an option for the Celtics. He might be rerouted this before the season even starts, however, or even at trade deadline. I don't know what's the long term deal with George Niang. I don't see him having a long term stay in Boston. However, I do see this player being like a player like in Derek White, who I did not like when the Celtics traded for him. Believe it or not, I love Derek White now, one of my favorite players. I did not like when they originally traded for him. And I hope George Niang is like that. I hope this is a player that I'm upset about what we gave up. I was upset about what we gave up for Derek White. I know, Josh Richardson, I know I shouldn't have been upset about that. However, I was upset about that because I was a big fan of Josh Richardson. And I feel this way with Porzingis, so I'm hoping I can turn the corner on George Niang and become a fan of him. And I hear he's a good player and he could give you some tough, minutes. And what Coach AJ said is not really like TJ McConnell, but he's a player that's going to give you everything that he has. So I am going to be not. I'm not going to be excited to see what he could do in Boston because I'm still very upset that we gave up Porzingis for him. But I am interested to see what he can do in Boston, and I'm interested to see if I become a fan of him because I don't know if he might be like a Gallinari, and we might, reroute him before he even plays a minute in Boston. But you never know. So I'm open to seeing how I am about George Niang, and I'm not going to judge him before he steps on the court, but I will say this hurt. It wasn't like when you broke the breaking news last night about Drew Holiday and we were excited. We were like, oh, Anthony Simons, that's a good deal. It wasn't like that. It was definitely upsetting when you broke the Porzingis move because it's like when you said Terrence Mann, I'm like, all right, like Terrence Mann,
I cannot lie. When I was reading, I was like, Terrence Mann. I'm like, and then it's like to the Nets, and I'm like,
okay,
who do
then
we?
what
I
do
was
we
like, who did
have?
we get? I'm like, did we get anybody? And it's like
You get
Niang to the Celtics, and I'm going,
No, when you said that, I about lost it. That's when my heart sank because when you were like Terrence Mann, I'm like, oh, okay, this is a move I could go for. We got Terrence Mann. What else we got? But then you said to the Nets, and then you said George Niang, and I'm like, this must be broken. Who hacked Shams? Like, you're telling me that we're getting a bum. I'm sorry. I hope I look back on this and I'm like, oh, George Niang, what a good move for Boston. But I don't think I'm going to be like that. And I'm upset and angry. Porzingis is a guy I met, and he was so humble and nice. When I met him, I gave him that fist bump, and he's like, "How are you guys doing?" in his Slovenian accent or whatever. It was a great moment for me, and it kind of is tough for me because that's like, for a personal story, that's like it's kind of sad for me to bring this up. But I'm going to bring this up on the program too. Is that when my grandfather was passing away, I actually was able to meet Porzingis, and we went to I Love Boston Sports, and it's funny because we talk about this, and they let us get further in the line so we could go see my grandfather before we thought he was going to pass away, and did end up passing away. But meeting Porzingis, watching him play on the court and being such a big fan of him, it definitely was a way to give me some hope and happiness when I was upset. So it was that personal connection I had with Porzingis to being able to meet him. So that's just a little backstory, but I am gonna miss Porzingis. I have a lot more connections with Porzingis too in my personal life, like him like having some happiness when we ultimately brought in Porzingis. I'm like, oh, this is great. And forever, this will be one of the greatest times in Boston history, and will forever be one of my favorite Celtics players when it's all said and done. When I'm, on the fan series myself someday with some other creator a long time from now, and I'm like, oh, remember Kristaps Porzingis with the Celtics.
You'll be telling your grandchildren about Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah,
when you're gray and old.
I'm gonna be like, look, I tell you what, that unicorn back in Boston, oh, he was something else. But no, there's definitely a lot of connections with Porzingis that I will forever recognize him as one of my favorite Celtics players.
And I gotta say too, it just feels like Porzingis and Holiday specifically, both of them, just talking on both, just feels like they just got here, like they were just new. Now we're both singing Sayonara.
No, they were just new. And this is the thing that is upsetting to me and I said this last night, is I still can't get over the fact that we have Drew Holiday. Like, it still hasn't hit me. Like, I'm like, what? I was rooting against this guy. I'm like looking at him all the time and, watching him play. And I'm like, I'm still used to him playing in Milwaukee when he was like, kicking the Celtics ass. But now, I'm like, we get Drew Holiday, and I'm like, we get Porzingis. One of my favorite moments with Porzingis is when he had like that preseason game, had 8 points in like 2 minutes or something like that. And I'm like, I love Porzingis, and I was so hyped up, and now it's like the window is so short but so great. Like, and it really does bring tears to my eyes. And I will say, we were just talking with Boston B Money about it, how it brings tears to his eyes, talking about the championship. And I agree, same here, because that team I fell in love with. That's the team that, I look back at the 2018 Red Sox when they won the World Series. That's a team that Child Griffin fell in love with. Well, this 2023-24 Boston Celtics team is the team that I fell in love with. And now Holiday's gone and Porzingis is gone, and the excitement behind getting those two players. And now it's like, all right, you had that peak for 2 years. And I think it's one thing as Celtics fans we took for granted. We took last year for granted. I think we were so focused on going back to back, and we didn't really get to cherish Porzingis and Holiday being on the Boston Celtics. And now Porzingis is on the Hawks and Drew Holiday is on the Trailblazers. So it's definitely sad. It's bittersweet.
24 hours ago, the team was still intact. And now it's 24 hours later, Porzingis and Holiday no longer around. No, it came quick. It wasn't like, we get to react to the Holiday trade and marinate. And this is what I was talking. I literally spent 40 minutes, Griffin, on a live yesterday, and I spent 40 minutes because it was a main time. I was talking about how the NBA, you got to let things marinate with these headlines, right? You gotta kind of let the public digest your headlines. Ever since that, Griffin, ever since that 40-minute segment, Holiday, Porzingis, gone. It's like, can we just we are like, so many things are happening. Like Kevin Durant is a Rocket.
And
Tyrese
it's like,
Halliburton's gone for next season. The Thunder just won. I mean, Game 7 feels like ages ago already. It seriously does. Like Game 7 feels like ages ago. Like we were talking about, like, oh, it happened the night before, and then all of a sudden it's boom, Celtics trades straight up, just
no,
immediately.
and,
And
and
it's crazy how fast the NBA fortunes can turn in it's just such a short period of time. Like we're sitting here 24 hours ago, just literally, like, Griffin, remember we were seriously 24 hours ago right now that live
it,
was going on, and we were like, look, you look like Tyler Hero.
I know
And
we were
now
saying,
Porzingis and Holiday are gone.
and
Gone.
the thing is,
Gone.
this is the thing, Seamus, too, with Anthony Simons. All right, I think that really was like, all right, well, we're getting a young player in return, and it was like, all right, well, let's not be sad about Holiday. Love you, thank you for winning us the championship. You're gone, so sad. I love you, Holiday. All right, now time to move on, build for the future. This Porzingis trade, you got a bag of chips in return. I'm gonna say, in Georgia.
Okay, yeah, no, you're completely correct. Seriously, last night the Simons return was, wow, what a fleece. We just got a
Wow, we did
26-year-old player for a 35-year-old
But,
player. Crazy, right?
but can I? But
Today it's very much the other way around. It's whoa,
whoa, like we
Atlanta.
just got a bag of chips. Yeah. So this is what I'm saying though. So it kind of hit me so hard too, to the fact where I'm like, all right, yay, we have Anthony Simons, but it's like, oh shit, like we just gave up Porzingis, and it's like
We need a big
now,
veteran.
and
Okay,
like
I'm
it's like
I'm
this shit,
telling you right now, the
but
big
it's like
man
this,
situation.
but it's like this too though. It's like this, and now I'm finally settling with, all right, Holiday and Porzingis are gone now. It's not just one of them. Holiday and Porzingis are both gone right now. So it's now sinking in, and it's like, oh great, we have Anthony Simons. But in a trade, would you all right, this is a question. If you were to trade both Holiday and Porzingis and in exchange get Georges Niang and Anthony Simons, are you making that trade? No, I'm not making that trade.
Holiday and Porzingis for Simons, Niang, a second round pick.
Yeah, are you making that trade?
What's the trade we just made? I mean,
It is, but if you're the GM,
well, first of all, I don't know what the other offers are, so I would always have to look at the other offers out there for other players. That being said, I mean, to get under the second apron is the biggest storyline, the biggest headline in this trade that nobody's going to talk about because everybody's going to look at it from a player perspective and go, well, we gave up Porzingis and we got back Niang and we all hate Niang and we all hate the minivan. Look at his build and look at this and look at the history, right? Everybody's going to look at the player perspective, but this was a move made from a salary perspective, which makes me think, yes, there's some winning intangibles with Georges Niang, which he actually, oddly enough, he has more wins than any other player this decade. So he's been on winning teams this entire decade. He has more wins than Jason Tatum in his NBA career. But anyway, Georges Niang, there are some winning intangibles with him. He is a forward you can bring off the bench. He does have that dog mentality, that personality, that that grit in which sometimes becomes annoying to other teams and to other fan bases and franchises. But when you have that on your own team, that's something you might need in the locker room. So you have winning intangibles there with Niang. That being said, the intangibles and the player might not matter here. It might just be the situation in Atlanta who wanted Porzingis and the salary in which you're getting back. You could have had deals out there where, say, you send Porzingis elsewhere for a $15 million contract or a $20 million, and you go, well, we saved $10 million here, but the Celtics, maybe they wanted to save more money and actually get themselves. And again, the biggest headline in all of this is the fact the Celtics were able to get themselves under the second apron with this deal, which means they can now aggregate salaries and trade. They can do a million things they couldn't do before. The couple things I see this, like, there are a couple things opening up for the Celtics when it comes to maneuvering from the second apron or out from under the second apron, or rather maneuvering under the second apron from above the second apron. Ultimately, the second apron, the implications, if we look at all the implications, we looked at them earlier on in this live. However, it's important to note now, the Celtics can aggregate salaries in a trade. They couldn't do that before. So now you can pair up Hauser and Niang for an $18 million player. You can throw in Pritchard if you wanted to, the $7 million. I don't think that's going to happen. You could throw in a lot of salary out there. We just calculated it while you were gone, Griffin. I believe let's get out the list of players here. So between Sam Hauser, Xavier Tillman, Nehemias Queta, J.D. Davis, and Jordan Walsh, Anthony Simons, and Georges Niang, they're making a combined $55 million, around that number, around $55 million. So you have $55 million in guys that you probably feel comfortable moving off of. And Simons maybe less so in that group, and that takes a big $27 million chunk out of that. But $55 million essentially, outside of the players who are deemed more safe and more valuable, such as Shireman, Pritchard, Derek White, and then Brown and Tatum. If you're not looking at Tatum, Brown, White, Pritchard, Shireman, if you're saying those are the safe names, Hauser, Niang, Simons, Tillman, Queta, Davison, Walsh, they all make $55 million. You could aggregate all those salaries and you could add up all those salaries and go get yourself a $50 million Giannis contract if you really wanted to, if you're the Celtics. Now, that is definitely not going to happen here, but you can aggregate all of these salaries to go out and potentially make another deal out there. And that is such a big thing in which the Celtics can now do. They can also take back 125% of they can take an extra 25% of the 100% of salary in which they send out, the outgoing salary in which they send out. They can take back 25%. So the Celtics can actually add salary in deals now, which is amazing. Now they can't add salary like a salary cap team. They can add salary in a way of, again, 25% on top of the outgoing salary. They can use the taxpayer mid-level exception. To me, that screams Al Horford. All of like, but this summer we were going into the summer going, are we going to really lose Al Horford? Is this really Al Horford? Now under the second apron, the Celtics have the taxpayer mid-level exception to use $5.7 million. Say they use it on Horford, they're still under the second apron. They sign back Horford, they use the exception, and that's something in which the Celtics can do now. Now the Celtics can sign a waived player. So say at the trade deadline when a player's bought out, waived, whatever happens, right? The Celtics can now sign a player who was previously making over the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which was $14.1 million. That's a huge thing considering last trade deadline we were going through all these names and the constant conversation was, well, can't sign this player because he's over 14 million prior to being waived. Can't sign this player, can't sign this player, can't sign this player. Well, that's not going to be the case anymore whatsoever with the Boston Celtics. You cannot use trade exceptions. Not a huge thing if you're the Celtics. I mean, trade exceptions is what it is, but you can use them now. If you're the Celtics, you can absorb players into trade exceptions to make them work. You cannot send out cash and trades if you're over the second apron. The Celtics can do that now if they want to add that on to moving up in the draft potentially tomorrow, and that's been a report in which in which has been rumored here this evening. And again, just the first round picks, the Celtics can now trade first round picks in advance and don't have to worry about their first round pick moving back in the future. Not a huge concern, but all of these different implications, the Celtics can now go and aggregate all these salaries in a trade. That there's so many more moves the Celtics can now make. There's just so many more moves the Celtics can now make with this trade than they could beforehand. And that's the main point in this trade is not only are you getting back, you're getting back Simons and Niang for Holiday and Porzingis. And from a player perspective, people are probably looking at that going, yeesh, like that is not exactly what we want to see. But it opens up the avenues and paths for the Celtics to actually go out and make more moves to add on to this roster. Whereas if you didn't make these moves, and even if you traded Porzingis for, say, a $20 million player and got something good out of him, right? And that's what I wonder within this entire equation is what was the actual value of Porzingis? Because the value
it wasn't. No, but can I say?
Because I think they could have got a $20 million player or $15 million player out of him. But under those circumstances, you get back a good player and you don't alleviate yourself of that second apron funk. And from that standpoint, you can't go out and sign Al Horford. You can't aggregate any salaries. You can't make more moves. Like you can't do a lot of things if you go out and get a player worth more than what Niang was worth, or about, I would say you could, the Celtics, who's basically they're working, if you got a player under $15 million, that would take you under the second apron within that deal. And of course, Niang, way under $15 million. He's at $8 million, about halfway, or, $7 million from that.
Well,
But
Seamus, can
but
I say
ultimately, I'll just say, but that is the main point of this trade. It's the second apron. It's the ability
it
to
is?
maneuver elsewhere, and that is the huge aspect in all this. And that's why you'd have to consider doing it, because it's in the NBA. It's not always about asset accumulation. It is about flexibility, right? To actually go out and acquire assets and move assets around. It's not always about, oh, we have the best players. It's how can we put ourselves in a position to acquire the best players in time. And that's
Well,
where the Celtics are right now. They're
well,
in asset accumulation and also and I shouldn't even say asset accumulation. It's not, I shouldn't say they're in asset accumulation mode. Now they're going to start to get into that zone a little bit more with where they're at. But beforehand and going into this mode, like with Porzingis and Holiday, the situation was not an asset accumulation. It was alleviation, financial alleviation, so that we could get on to the asset accumulation.
well,
That's how I see this move.
totally. But I have to say this with the Celtics, it's the fact of getting under the luxury tax, which was the main concern. You obviously know that. And I think the big thing is now building a winning team for when Jason Tatum can come back next year. So you need to build a winning team for Jason Tatum, and to add on to your take though with Porzingis about the salary and what can you get for him, where is his value at, and you look at that, and it's like, all right, you can't get a lot for him because it's obvious, he hasn't had the resume in the last 2 years to prove what you can get for him. You can't get a lot for him. It's just the fact that you dumped him off and you're like, all right, at this point, just give us money. Like that's pretty much what they asked for. They're like, all right, we're just taking money for it. And it's like, all right, but you gave up Georges Niang. It's essentially they're like, all right, just take off the salary. I wish I would have preferred if we just traded Porzingis for some picks, like moving up in the draft or anything like that. I wouldn't be mad about that, but I don't know. It's definitely, it's bittersweet for sure. For this trade, it's definitely more so bitter. It's definitely a trade where it sucks and it hurts, and it's going to hurt for a little bit because we've grown to love Porzingis in Boston. But what are you going to do about it? There's nothing we can do. I think, but again, I'm going to say a quote that Coach AJ said. I'm going to say this is Brad Stevens is already 2-3 steps ahead of us. While we're recording this right now, Brad Stevens already has a plan. And yes, it hurts right now, but in the long run, it's going to pay off because Brad Stevens is smart. He brought us a championship. He brought in these pieces. So you think he's not just going to give it up if he doesn't have a plan. There's obviously a plan behind it. He's not just going to give up these players for nothing. There's a plan behind him. He's not like the Red Sox, and love the Red Sox, but he's not like the Red Sox and going in a way where they're like, all right, do we do this? Do we step back? What do we do? He knows. He has a plan, and he's already 2-3 steps ahead of us.
What a rough week for Boston.
Oh, terrible week for Boston.
Devers gone, Porzingis gone, Drew Holiday gone. I mean,
those words just make me sick. You saying those names. If you told just a Boston fan about a month ago, they're like, yeah, Porzingis, Devers, and Holiday and Brad is gonna win the Stanley Cup. Like if you said this like a year ago, they'd be like, I'm gonna throw up. They're like, I'm so sick. Like, why would you even say that? No, but that's literally what we've had from Boston sports in the past week. Like, give us a break. Like the Simons one. All right, it's all right with the Simons one because you're getting in a good return. But then this trade happened with Porzingis, and it's like, all right, well now I miss Drew Holiday too. I just missed that whole 18th banner team, so it hit me after. I'm like, all right, well, I'm so happy about Simons, but then it's like, all right, now the two players that you just received in a trade last year, it's like they're gone now. And you know, I'm getting vibes from. It's kind of like vibes with what is it with I was so excited because I saw this post. It was like with Simons and Porzingis on the roster too in the starting five. But and I saw a similar post to this with, you know, Porzingis being in the same roster with Robert Williams, and then all of a sudden, 2 days later, Robert Williams is traded in a trade for Drew Holiday. But you know, I think again, I'm gonna say it. Brad Stevens is 2-3 steps ahead of us, and I feel like at the end of the day, it's going to be worth it in the long run because Brad's a smart GM. Brad's a smart GM and he knows what he's doing.
Well, I gotta say this too. I wonder, talk about, oh, Brad, 5 steps ahead, right? Well, or multiple steps ahead. I texted this in our CTW chat earlier, and I just, this is another trade comes up where I wonder, do you think the NBA, the front offices across the NBA, do you think they use AI to sift through every single, because there are only so many players under contract in the NBA, and so many different maneuvers and routes you can take. There are only so many, right? You have, Google Assistant, AI, whatever you want to call it, right? Well, whatever service you're using. I wonder if the NBA, if they have AI to actually go through everything and come out with every plausible scenario. So when you talk about Brad being multiple steps ahead, I do wonder. It's like, do they have advanced artificial intelligence doing that for them? However, Georges Niang, some history here with the Boston Celtics, all right, and the minivan. I'm going to go ahead and say the Twitter reaction over the minivan making its way to Boston, not great. People do not want him on the team, and maybe this is why. Georges Niang, 2 years ago, in the NBA playoffs, grabbing at Jaylen Brown's leg. Just grabbing at his leg there. Look at that. Look right there. That's a pretty dirty play right there from Georges Niang. This was a big deal when it happened, and definitely something you got to look at and go, that doesn't look amazing right there. It's
I
caught
tell
on
you
film.
what,
I got TNT caught him. This might have been ABC, one of the national network providers of the NBA caught this right here. Not a great look for Niang, but him and Jaylen Brown now teammates. Now teammates. Any thoughts on this, Griffin? Oh, Griffin. He might have
so
been.
I will
Oh, here we
say
go.
on this, like it's like I they gotta squash the beef, but like a funny story I have to say is from a Maine Celtics perspective with Philip Wheeler in the Maine Celtics. You know, they'll definitely squash this beef as Philip Wheeler got into an altercation with the Maine Celtics, dunking and talking smack to the bench. And you know, that's just the aggressiveness and toughness with players. So there was also that altercation, and they parted ways. And then Philip Wheeler was welcomed with open arms when he came in, and he built a good connection in Maine, I will have to say. So you never know how it could go, but that's just a dirty move, and I'm not excited to have that guy on my team. I'm just saying that. I miss Porzingis already, but I really hope he proves me wrong. I really hope we look at this recording and it's like a Derek White for me, where it's like, all right, I wasn't happy at first about Derek White. Now I love Derek White. Hopefully it's the same with Georges Niang. I'm just saying. I hope that could be the route that we go down.
Yeah, and I can't tell Georges Niang. I can't tell if he's going to be here for 2 days or 2 years or 2 decades. It could be literally either 2 days or 2 decades. That's where the range is for Georges Niang. But there is another photo I have here queued up, and this one is from the NBA Cup back in November. Remember, right before, this was either at the end of the first quarter or halftime here. I mentioned
I
this on the
remember
broadcast
this
earlier.
one.
Georges Niang that's Georges Niang there on the ground, tries to draw a charge on a Jason Tatum step back, and Tatum drills this shot in his face and then gives him that little get out of here type of thing, right? Get out of here. Like, man, you're not going to do that to me, try to draw a foul like that. Get that soft stuff out of here. So there's this picture. So some history there with Georges Niang from Jason Tatum as well. So Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, both with their own history with Georges Niang. There are a couple of more. There are probably a couple more moments
Oh,
on the
there's
court that we
totally
can bring up for sure.
there's totally more moments, but Oh, it sucks and it hurts, Seamus. I will say that it hurts, but
It
who knows?
does.
Who
It
knows?
really does. I do want to bring up a couple more things here. Not really getting into topic discussion, but just the presentation of a couple of rumors, right? Rumors, in which I want to throw up here on screen in a second. One of them is going to be about Drew Holiday and his status with the Blazers right now, because the Blazers, it seems as if they brought in Drew Holiday to play. They want him to play with their young core. It seems as if that's the case. Now, the Blazers want Drew Holiday to play for them, but does Drew Holiday want to play for the Portland Trailblazers? That is another question in this entire equation here. Holiday is going to a situation where they're going to be building from the bottom of the Western Conference instead of he's coming from a situation where the Celtics were already atop the East. He's 35 years old, only so many years left in his prime, is paid. So that's the good part of Drew Holiday's situation. However, Drew Holiday, this coming out from Legion Hoops, Drew Holiday is reportedly pissed that he was traded to Portland per Steve B. Hoop. He does not want to go there. So this coming out from Legion Hoops earlier, and again, this is just a rumor. It's a rumor, folks. It's not an actual news story. So we do have to be mindful of that. But Drew Holiday, we talked a lot about the fit with Anthony Simons and Drew Holiday, him flocking out to Portland. However, it seems as if Drew Holiday could be disgruntled
Well,
with with playing in Portland.
well,
But go ahead.
that could be some bad blood between the Celtics too, and I hope it's not like a Devers situation with the obviously Red Sox where it was miscommunication and it was back and forth with ownership and everything.
But this is where I think, man, it doesn't matter, man.
It doesn't.
We
It doesn't
needed to move
because
him. It's
he
business.
knew
It's business,
he was going to be
unfortunately.
traded. He knew he was going to be traded. So like you look at that, he knew he was going to be traded. He knew that, but it's like, all right, he was willing to come to Boston. So I could see him being pissed about it for sure, because he wanted to come to Boston and now, but I think he's got his bag. He got his championship. I
Well,
feel
that's what
like
I'm saying. He has a ring. The Celtics paid him the extension. That's the thing. The Celtics gave him his payday into the future. I mean, he can thank Brad Stevens, the Celtics ownership, the Celtics front, all the executives for the $37 million he's owed as a 37-year-old later on in his NBA career. You think about all those aspects. Pretty good situation. Him moving to and on from Boston, it's gonna hit hard when you're moving away from a good situation in which he's in. But it's not as if he's being done wrong in my mind. He's not. I don't see that world whatsoever with Drew Holiday at all. And the Celtics, this is always going to be a business. The NBA is always going to be a business. They needed to move off his salary, his future money this summer. And it really was getting to a point, his regression last year, where you could look at it and go, this was almost reminiscent of Kemba Walker. Now, Kemba Walker was, completely different circumstances, multiple knee surgeries before he even got to the Celtics, and then his knee just was not serviceable when he went from struggling with the knee soreness, availability, to just straight up couldn't play, right? It's like he was hampered within his play to couldn't play as an efficient guard on the floor. I worry, Drew Holiday, he's not to that status with his knee, but he was to the status of this money is going to be maybe one of the, I don't want to say worst deals, but it could be a pretty nasty contract as you move forward for the Celtics. And by nasty, I mean it's a big deal in which the player, I don't see the player matching the production of the player matching the worth of the deal, as well as if you're trying to get off the deal, you're probably not getting anything for that contract. So the Celtics 100% needed to move Drew Holiday, and what he thinks of it, it's unfortunately not the Celtics' problem. And it's also something that I look at and go, well, he won a championship here. The Celtics gave him an extension, paid him his money. You can thank the Celtics for that in the future. It's it's definitely a bitter moment when you move on from a great situation, but you always have to look at the positives, and you have to look at the circumstances in which met everyone to come to the conclusions in which happened during this entire situation. However, This came up earlier. We don't have to get into a whole topic discussion on it because we already talked about it at length. However, this is the rumor from Legion Hoops. The Celtics are aggressively trying to land a lottery pick for tomorrow's draft per Steve B. Hoop. So the same reporter coming out with the Drew Holiday story, coming out with the story on the Celtics trying to aggressively land
Well,
a lottery pick.
well, Seamus, I'm gonna give my take on this really quick, and then I'm gonna have to head out because I have work.
No, we're coming to a conclusion here. We're
Okay.
gonna hop off on so you're good.
Okay, perfect. With this, it's an interesting one. It's like, what can you give up? And I said it earlier before we disconnected, is that it's like, all right, can you give up a Sam Hauser, your picks that you have in this draft, and a future one for the lottery? Can you? If not, I'm not really open to it. Maybe you throw in Georges Niang in there too. But I don't know. What are your thoughts, though, Seamus?
The moving up into the lottery of the draft, very interesting to me because the Celtics this next year is 100% a retool year in my mind. If you're trying to move up in the lottery and get, I mean, the Celtics, I think two things that I noticed just in general, and not with the the players coming back in the deal, but just in general with the Celtics last year and where they might look to go next year, considering what we saw in the playoffs with not only the Celtics but every other team, considering the Pacers and the Thunder and how they looked in the playoffs and what type of teams they were and how they were built. The Celtics, they need to get younger and faster. All right, younger and faster. Last year, it's like they were old and slow. Okay, they looked old and slow against the Thunder. They looked old and slow against the Pacers, specifically in the regular season, both those teams who went on to make the NBA Finals. But other young teams too, like the Houston Rockets. And even the New York Knicks aren't young, but they looked old and slow against the New York Knicks. And that's ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous in the playoffs. And that was the circumstance meeting the Celtics when you have Al Horford out there, Porzingis, Holiday, those three primarily. Those are the three guys we looked at last year. You know, three of the top seven guys in the rotation, or really three of the top six guys, all old. Okay, they're all. Well, I shouldn't say all. I mean, Porzingis is 30 years old, but Holiday's 35. Horford, he's going to be 39, and he was 38 last year. So Holiday was 34. Horford was 38 last year, and they'll be 39 and 35 next year. Porzingis, he's 29 going on 30. He's not old, but Porzingis moves around like an old guy. He's a little slower of a big guy, right? He's not necessarily a quick burst, explosive type of big, right? A physically daunting big. So last year, the Celtics, they looked old and slow. This summer, I think they're going to look to get young and quick. And so far, the Celtics have done a good job at getting a little bit younger. You trade Drew Holiday, 35-year-old, for a 26-year-old and Anthony Simons. He's a quicker player, different type of player, and more Anthony Simons more offensive oriented. We talked a lot about that on the live yesterday. But with the Porzingis trade, again, that wasn't a personnel move in my mind at all. That was again a salary move. It wasn't, oh, we like Georges Niang. Maybe you do like Georges Niang a little bit if you're the Celtics. Go, there's some personality here, and we need a forward, and we can slot him in here, and maybe there's some upside there. But it was not necessarily a personnel move. But he's also a move in which you could that's a contract in which you could flip for something else later on down the line. So the Celtics this summer, I think they're just going to try and get a little younger and a little faster. I also want to talk about this real quick before we hop on out of here. The Brooklyn Nets in this deal. Okay, the Brooklyn Nets in this deal received Terrence Mann. I just realized what happened in this deal. We basically could have received Terrence Mann and Georges Niang for Kristaps Porzingis, but we wanted to cut the money. And guess who ate that extra money? Brooklyn. And it was Terrence Mann. And we likely, just saying, we may have picked Terrence Mann we may have picked Georges Niang over Terrence Mann. I think we definitely did here. I think the Celtics, in terms of the value for Porzingis, they could have received Terrence Mann and Georges Niang for Kristaps Porzingis, but receiving that salary would not have allowed the Celtics to get under the second apron. And if you were to send Niang to the Nets and Mann to the Celtics would have only cut off what? About 14, $15 million from Porzingis' salary,
Yeah,
which would
so
have put them just at the precipice of the second apron. It would have put them just there, right? If you got Terrence Mann. However, Brooklyn hops into the deal. They take away Atlanta's first round pick this year. Right? People say first overall. No, not first overall. First round pick, and which is number 22 in this year's draft. So the Nets take that from Atlanta and they eat Terrence Mann's salary. I detailed this, not that exact move with Niang and Mann, but I detailed this when we were talking about Drew Holiday and the Mavericks a couple of weeks ago. I was saying a third team could get involved in a situation with the Celtics where, say, the Celtics are sending away Holiday's $30+ million salary or Porzingis's $30 million salary to another team who's getting rid of, say, two $15 million salaries or whatever it is. Yet the Celtics don't want one of those two $15 million salaries. They only want one. And then a third team gets involved, such as the Nets, to eat that salary, that extra salary. That's what happened in this deal with Niang and Mann. The Celtics could have received Niang and Mann, but from a salary perspective, that's not what the Celtics were trying to achieve in this deal. Therefore, the Nets, they eat Terrence Mann's contract, and that's how this deal goes about. But the Nets, I want to point out right now, the Brooklyn Nets. So they give away nothing in this deal, right? Let's the deal. First of all, let's make sure we got the deal right here. So the deal in its entirety. Let's just give it out for everybody one more time here on this broadcast. Um, so the Hawks received Kristaps Porzingis and a second round pick. The Celtics received Georges Niang and a second round pick, and the Nets received Terrence Mann and the number 22 pick in this year's draft. So one of those second round picks could be a Nets pick, but otherwise the Nets didn't give up anything for Terrence Mann and the number 22 overall pick. I want to mention on the Nets front, the Brooklyn Nets are doing something pretty crazy right now. So in this year's draft, the Brooklyn Nets hold the number 8 pick, they hold the number 19 pick, they hold the number 22 pick, and they hold the number 26 and number 27 picks. Wow. So
wow,
so
that's
Griffin, stay with me here. That would be 5 first round picks. 8, 19, 22, 26, and 27. You know what I'm going to go ahead and say here? The Brooklyn Nets are moving up the board on draft night, all right? I'm saying the Brooklyn Nets at number 8, watch out. Watch out. I'm just saying right now at number 8, the Brooklyn Nets, could they move up into the top 4? Could they move up into the top 5? Could they move up a spot or two? I mean, 5 first round picks, the Nets, and some cap space as well. Not sure how much more cap space they have after this Terrence Mann deal here, or eating Terrence Mann's contract. But the Brooklyn Nets, pay attention to the Brooklyn Nets tomorrow on draft night and moving forward. 5 first round picks, and the 5th one coming in this trade tonight within the Porzingis deal. But Griffin, just quick, what are your quick thoughts on that?
it's definitely interesting, and it's like if they 5 first round picks, it's like you don't even want 5 players on your team like that. Like you don't
No,
need
that's
players.
kind of it gets a little expensive, really, if you're thinking about it.
It gets expensive for one. For two, it's like, all right, you have to start making roster cuts at that point. And then
I mean, this thing that's a third. I mean, you're allowed 15 standard contracts.
yeah, so like
It's a third of your roster in first round picks. You'd have to think the Nets, they have to move off some of these picks. They're 5 first round picks. That's insane. And so here's what they would be paying also to the picks in which they are giving out here, or picking at. So the number 8 pick would be making $6.9 million. The number 19 pick, they'd be making $3.8 million. The number 22 pick, they'd be making $3.4 million. And then 26 and 27, 26 would be making $2.9 million, and then 27 $2.8 million. So that's just the rookie scales in which each player or each pick will make from the Nets. But wow, 5 first round picks for the Brooklyn Nets.
insane.
Crazy.
Yep.
However, that is going to do it for us here on CTW Live. Kristaps Porzingis, no longer a Boston Celtic. Georges Niang now entering the confines of the Boston Celtics. The minivan, great nickname. I gotta say, the minivan, pretty good nickname for Georges Niang out there, especially with this build.
Yeah,
However,
I will have to say, Seamus, Coach AJ did brighten up my spirits when he said that. That helped me a little.
the nickname, I can see it. The shirts, they're going to look nice. They are going to look nice. However, that is going to do it here for us on CTW Live. Drew Holiday, no longer a Celtic. Kristaps Porzingis, no longer a Boston Celtic. Crazy, crazy times here for the Boston Celtics and the offseason, which is more than underway. It's here, folks. Welcome to the NBA offseason. However, that is going to do it for us here on CTW Live. I'm your host, Seamus Zarlingo. Alongside of me tonight, Griffin Aldridge. And of course, thank you all for watching. And as we always say on here, go Celtics.